Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 9. The Price of Power. Alright, we're done for tonight, Yoruichi announced. You're getting much better, Chad-kun. Thank you, sensei, the gentle giant rumbled lowly as he leaned against a tree to recover. I appreciate you taking the time to train me. It's a sensei's privilege to help a student eliminate a weakness and turn it into strength, Yoruichi replied with a smirk. She was in human form now. It had been almost a week since Chad had arrived in Soul Society, and every day the young man was getting faster. They had progressed to spars today, and while Chad was still unable to land a blow on the goddess of Flash, he was getting closer. Chad, on his part, had realized that transforming his arm affected more of his body than just what the armor covered. His reflexes were faster, his body stronger and more durable, his mind processing information just a little bit quicker. This worried him slightly, but as he hadn't noticed any change in his own character, Chad figured that he wasn't slowly changing into a living hollow. El brazo derecho del gigante had changed in his several spars with Yoruichi. Before, his arm had white lines separating the black from the dark magenta, but those lines had disappeared. The shoulder extension had become more pointed as well, and the arm's design became far more intricate, with the red and black forming patterns. This upgrade had prompted a large increase in Chad's speed, durability and strength. In regards to his search for his abuelo, Chad felt he was getting closer. They had reached District 56 the day after he'd heard the tip from the kind stranger at the bar. Unfortunately, the district was far enough north that they sometimes had to defend themselves from more violent districts, and so most of the people who had been there at the time of Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa's presence had either died, or moved away. The others hadn't heard of him either, but Chad persisted in his search. Remembering the stranger's words, he and Yoruichi had continued northward, finally stumbling upon a promising conversation in District 68. Flashback. It's been quite some time since one of those lost children have stumbled in here, a kindly bartender murmured as Chad walked in. Young man, do you come from up north? We hear precious little ever since children and old men stopped fleeing from those lands. The shaggy-haired youth shook his head negatively, holding up a picture. I am looking for this man, Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa. Can't say I've heard or seen him before, but in these parts that's not exactly unusual. End flashback. Chad was undaunted, however, as the conversation had hinted that Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa had succeeded in his plan to create a safe haven for children. He and Yoruichi had continued north, with Chad defeating yet not killing the various challengers that tried to intimidate or kill him. Today, they had heard from Districts 75 through 79 that there was a group who took it upon themselves to take in children, and the group was situated in District 80. Yoruichi had stopped Chad from dashing straight there, however. Flashback. We will go tomorrow, Chad-kun. But, why? Chad questioned, clearly anxious to go. The nights out here in these districts are nothing we should take part in, Yoruichi had answered quietly. Here, nights are considered the time for rapists, thieves, murderers, and turf wars. If we want to be looked at favorably by this organization, we should appear in daylight. Now, prepare yourself. End flashback. Chad awoke the next day at dawn, fully rested. Eating some provisions that they had purchased a few districts prior, he was unsurprised to find Yoruichi already awake and waiting in cat form. Shall we? The cat proposed. The giant of a man merely nodded and used his paso del viento, disappearing from the clearing. Yoruichi followed from a distance. Arriving on the outskirts of the outermost northern district, Chad slowed to a brisk walking speed. Yoruichi followed behind by quite some distance. He had barely been walking more than 5 minutes when a lithe shirtless, heavily scarred man approached. He appeared close to 30, and had obviously not shaved in quite some time judging from the growing beard. Who are you? The man demanded. Never seen you round here. My name is Sato Yasutora. I am merely passing through, Chad rumbled calmly. Just passing through my ass. The man scoffed. There's no district beyond this one. What could you possibly be looking for? I am looking for my grandfather, Chad replied honestly. I have heard he may be in this district. Perhaps you have heard of him. Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa. Instantly, the man's scowl grew deeper. Yeah, I heard of him. He's changing this place, and I don't like it. This is the district of men, where the only law of this land is the law you can make with your own strength. Is he not following that law, then? Chad queried. If he is using his own strength to protect the women, children and the elderly, then isn't that the law he is enforcing? Shut up. You don't know nothing, Sato. He raised his left arm, using his right to trace a particularly nasty-looking scar on his left shoulder going partway down his side. See this? I got this scar fighting for my life against the monster of a man, and it was in that fight that I discovered the rush, the thrill of combat. If things keep up the way your damn grandpa wants them to, then everything will be too fucking peaceful. Why is peace so bad? Is life not precious? Chad contended. The man spat on the ground to his left. You don't sound like you're afraid to die, yet you're spouting that same bullshit, he said slowly, eyeing Chad. You look plenty strong, you might even be good enough to survive out here. Why not just take what you want? Why are you so quick to put down my grandfather's ideas? Chad countered. He had to admit, he was slowly becoming frustrated by this man's constant degradation of his abuelo's teachings. You ask an awful lot of questions. The man commented, his voice coated in irritation. Fine, if that old decrepit fart's ideas are so good, then let them beat me and my whole gang. You against all of us. If you win, hell, we'll even show ya where he is. You lose, you die. I accept your terms, Chad said simply. Call out your men. The man turned to the side, put 2 fingers in his mouth and blew a shrill whistle. A mere half-minute later, Chad was surrounded by upwards of 50 men. You ready, fucking tree hugger? One of the men taunted. Chad raised his right arm, allowing the red and black armor to paint itself up from his hand to his shoulder. El brazo direct del gigante, he murmured, the manifestation of my faith in my abuelo's teachings. What are you, some kind of Shinigami? One soul asked, drawing his sword. Nah, can't be, not wearing the robes, see. A nearby one drawled, but he does have a weird power, I'll grant ya that. Chad shook his head, can we just get on with this? Alright, men, attack. The boss yelled. The mob roared its approval and rushed in. The fight was over in hardly any time at all. All of Chad's speed training proved itself when he effortlessly knocked out the entire crowd, until only he and the boss were left. Chad had nary a scratch, and the men had all been knocked out and not permanently injured. The boss, instead of looking scared, only looked more excited. Finally, a strong one. My name is Pretamaru, show me what you got, Sato Yasutora. He rushed in, throwing a right jab which was blocked, before trying to follow it up with a powerful kick to Sato's thigh, hoping to break the bone. Chad showed little reaction to the blow. He'd been hit harder before, even before he'd manifested his powers. Instead, the gentle giant forcibly grabbed Pretamaru's hands and used his armored right arm to hold the mob boss up by the wrists. Yield, Chad quietly ordered, his voice serious. Yield, and take me to my grandfather. The gang's boss may thoroughly enjoy fights, but he was not so stupid as to not know when he'd lost. Pretamaru felt as though he'd damn near broken his foot when he'd kicked Chad's leg. It was like kicking a steel girder. There's no way I can win. Fine, but if he's really your grandpa, you're not gonna like this. How so? Pretamaru sighed. He's being held captive by a rival gang, and more people join him all the time. I've lost some of my best people to them, 'cause they want to be part of the power that captured the heart of the revolution. Chad's expression hardened. Take me there, now. Fine, but you gotta protect me. I'm no match for them. I hear that some of them used to give that Shinigami Taicho, I think his name was Kenpachi, a good fight, and that means they're damn near gods of the sword. Chad set the man down and glared. Move it. Pretamaru swallowed hard. Yes, sir. 40 minutes or so later, Pretamaru had led Chad to a mansion on top of a large hill. In there? Chad questioned. Yeah, now if you'll excuse me, I'm getting out while the getting's good. Chad let Pretamaru run. Eyes narrowed beneath his shaggy hair, he used Paso del Viento again to appear at the front door. Password, came the test question. In response, Chad used his armored arm to punch through the door, then twisting so he could open the door himself. The door answerer gaped at him, or more specifically at the arm. I suppose the arm is rather strange looking to them, Chad admitted, but the staring is getting irritating. Excuse me, have you seen this man? He queried, holding up a picture of his abuelo. Someone out there told me you guys had the pleasure of his company. The man in front of Chad visibly gathered his courage and smirked at the newcomer. Yeah, I seen him. He's downstairs, but you do realize you'll never get to him, unless you're a prisoner yourself. The next instant, Chad buried his unarmored fist into the man's diaphragm, making the gang member keel over as the breath was knocked out of him. I'm sorry, but I can't have you calling for backup. Chad finished him with a chop to the neck, knocking him out. With that, he began running downstairs. A few minutes later, Chad had made it to the chambers, where several people were kept prisoner in cells. Who are you? The first one who saw him demanded. You don't look like one of them. There was suddenly much noise as everyone rushed to the bars to get a good look. My name is Sato Yasutora, Chad introduced himself. Indeed, I am not part of any gang, I am merely looking for my grandfather. For what felt like the millionth time, Chad got another picture out of his pack and held it up. Has anyone seen him? He began passing them out. One of the prisoners, a few cells down, began laughing as he received his copy. You fool, the prisoner cackled. You're too late. He was here all right, but he was taken out this morning. They're going to kill him at noon in front of the building he made with his own hands, in front of the children he tried to save. Chad dropped the papers he had in shock, anger and despair and rage warring within him. I need to get there in time. Tell me where he is, I beg you. Not a chance. If my gang had caught him, we'd have done the same thing. Chad saw red as rage won out. He reached through the bars with El Brazo Direct del Gigante and held the man up by his neck. Where is he? He roared. He vaguely felt his left arm tingle, but ignored it for the moment. Every cell fell silent, even the prisoner. Tell me, or I swear I will snap your neck, and the neck of everyone here. You have 10 seconds. 10. All the prisoners suddenly erupted in chaos. Tell him. For the love of Cammy, tell him. I don't wanna die. 9. The tingle in Chad's left arm grew more insistent. Chad steadfastly ignored it. I have more important things to worry about right now. Don't kill me. I'm only here 'cause I didn't want to join these bastards. Come on, man, tell him. 8. Chad noticed the man held in his grip was glaring at him defiantly. Anything to say? Fuck you. The man spat on his arm, and Chad tightened his grip, making it more difficult for the man to breathe. 7. The hall was suddenly quiet, watching in fear as the prisoner's hands scrabbled at Chad's hand futilely, trying desperately to get the giant's grip off of him. 6. I think I know where he is. A small voice cried out. Chad immediately let the man drop as he turned to the source of the voice. It turned out to be a boy, about 7 years old. Please, tell me, Chad asked gently, his anger gone as if it had never existed. He didn't even notice as the strange feeling in his left arm faded. I just remembered, there's a big farmhouse a few miles west of the town outside, you can't miss it. It's the only place where there are adults and children working together to make it bigger. If you let me out, I'll take you there. The boy babbled. Chad let out a smile. Finally, stand back. The boy quickly did so, with wide eyes. Chad stretched his arms for a moment before gripping the top of the thick bar with his armored arm and quickly snapped off the top. Then he did the same with the bottom, completely taking the bar off. Tossing it carelessly to the side, Chad picked up the boy and carried him in his arms. We're going to be going very fast, the giant warned, so don't be scared. Okay. The boy snuggled into Chad's arms, but kept his head poked out so he could see. Wait, aren't you going to free me too? The stubborn prisoner whom Chad had choked for a short time demanded. I told you when he was going to be executed. Chad looked over his shoulder and glared with his single visible eye. And why would I free someone who would have just as gleefully killed my abuelo? With that, he used Paso del Viento to disappear. Less than a minute later, he was outside the mansion. Which way? Chad asked. The boy pointed a little ways off from the city. That way. With that, Chad dashed off with Paso del Viento, going as fast as he could. For his part, the boy was enjoying the ride. Once every couple of minutes, Chad would make sure he was going the right way. Finally, Chad could see the farmhouse himself. It's a good thing Yoruichi-sensei pounded speed into me, he murmured, glancing at the sun. It's about 10 o'clock, I've got some time. Chad came to a stop outside the farmhouse and set the boy down. That was fun, Sato-san. The boy said with a wide smile. The giant of a man smiled back. Come, let's see if they'll let us in. They walked to the door and knocked. Password, came the query. The voice was masculine, experienced but not particularly old-sounding. Chad had to guess middle-aged. Chad rolled his eyes behind his shaggy hair. Why does everyone keep asking that? He wondered with a little exasperation leaking into his tone. Listen, I heard that De La Rosa was captured, and I want to help. How do we know your intentions are as you say? The man behind the door demanded. He's okay. The boy piped up. He came and rescued me from that gang you keep warning me about. What, Kryoro, is that you? Yep, the newly identified Kryoro chirped. The door opened cautiously, as the man peered out. He let Kryoro in quickly before staring at Chad, trying to judge his worth. What's with the arm? He asked bluntly. Chad blinked and glanced at his right arm. Oh, I left it active, my apologies, that's my power. I used it to save Kryoro. Excuse me. He deactivated his power, and the black and red armor seemed to melt down his arms to his hands, where it disappeared, revealing his normal arm. The man took another few seconds, but finally nodded. You can come in. The others are outside working the fields at the moment, but they'll be back for lunch at noon or so. Chad quietly entered and closed the door behind him. I apologize for making you uncomfortable, but Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa was my abuelo when he was alive. I was looking for him to help me with a troubling problem before I heard he was in trouble. Please allow me to help. Why didn't you help him then when you rescued Kryoro, then? The stranger questioned suspiciously. The old man had already been taken out by then, Oji-san. Kryoro told him, tugging on the man's shirt. I like Sato Nisan, please let him help. Maybe he can stay after. The door guard stiffened, then looked at Chad sternly. He wasn't there. Chad shook his head, not according to the other prisoners. He'd apparently been taken out by then. Supposedly, he's to be publicly executed in front of this farm, at noon today. When all the men are tired and weary of working the farm, the guard connected. We won't be able to stop them then, not without help. That's where I can help, Chad told him with a small amount of pride leaking into his voice. As long as there aren't any Shinigami in the gang, and they don't expect me, I should be able to just grab him and get him away. I have a speed technique much like the Shinigami Shunpo. That could work, the guard finally sighed. I'm sorry for treating you as I have. I've lived in this district for so long, it's become instinct to be hostile to everyone new. Listen, my name's Lonus. I haven't used a last name in so long, I'm afraid I've forgotten it. Sato Yasutora. Chad inclined his head. Kryoro, would you go tell the other workers everything? Ask them to come back as fast as they can. I'm sure they want to help too. Sure thing, Sato Nisan. With that, the hyper boy was off and dashed through the door. Chad sat down in a nearby chair and ran a hand through his long, shaggy hair. Something wrong, Sato-san? Lonus questioned. I'm a bit nervous about seeing my abuelo again. What do you say to someone who you've buried, mourned over, and moved past many years ago? Well, I imagine he'll feel the same way, Lonus replied, seating himself opposite his visitor. It's been just as long for him as it has for you, and in his perspective, he lost you the same way you lost him. We don't get to watch over you from here in the afterlife. Never thought about it like that. His arms burned, his fingers bled as he blinked a mixture of blood and sweat away. Ishida Ryu stared calculatingly at his almost too calm parent in the secret training room underneath the hospital. Ishida Ryukin was mostly untouched, though there were a few holes in his clothes due to near misses on Ryu's part. However, Ryu had multiple scratches, including a shallow one directly above his left eye. Have you only grown this much, Ryu? Ryukin asked tonelessly. I would think that you would be far stronger, with how long you have trained. Ryu grit his teeth. Then let me show you my skill. Show me. The two of them disappeared using Harenkyaku once more. Ryu fired almost 36 arrows at once at his father, having realized by now that it was only doing this that would grant him any chance of a hit. Ryukin countered by firing over 100 at him with a single shot, over an area twice as wide as Ryu was tall. What was even more impressive, however, was the fact that Ryukin had not used his other hand to draw the arrow, merely his Reiatsu manipulation. Ryu flashed away yet again, firing more arrows. Even he began murmuring an incantation. Tilt the goblet to the west. He fired another few arrows before snatching one of his quincy silver tubes from the utility belt around his waist. Emerald Grail, Ryu called out, flinging the liquid-like spiritual energy at Ryukin, which then transformed into a powerful blue blast, obscuring his view of Ryukin. Not waiting to see if that worked, which he doubted it would, Ryu used Harenkyaku again, readying several more powerful arrows in his bow and quickly firing them into smoke where Ryukin had been, in the hopes that he would connect with a lucky shot. However, when the smoke cleared, Ryukin was not there. Now where is he? Ryu thought grimly, looking around and feeling with his spiritual sense. That was better, Ryu. The calm voice coming from directly behind him would have surprised the teenager in question if Ryu hadn't already sensed him. The boy turned around to see the appraising look Ryukin was giving him. His clothes were certainly far more damaged, even if Ryukin himself appeared unharmed. Perhaps I can fight a little more seriously. Ryu's eyes did widen at this, before narrowing as he blinked more blood-tainted sweat from his eye. Shit, he's still not fighting seriously. Resolutely, he pushed his glasses up on his nose. Glad I could give you a good fight, he bit out sardonically, trying to ignore the pain from his bleeding fingers. I need a better glove. Ryukin sighed and shook his head. You'll need to be far better than this to give me a good fight, Ryu. Prepare yourself. Halfway across Karakura town, in a different secret underground training room. What do you mean? Ichigo became a hollow and disappeared to Hueco Mundo. An outraged Tatsuki demanded. Ma, it's not that bad, really, Urahara tried to reassure. How did this happen? Inoue asked quietly. She'd guessed, ever since Ichigo's Reiatsu had suddenly disappeared from her senses, that he'd disappeared from this world. Urahara sighed. Ichigo-kun had to fight his inner hollow again last night, and he lost. His inner hollow, apparently calling himself Cazador, said he'd be sating his hunger on Manos Grande in Hueco Mundo, the hollow dimension. He paused to scratch his chin. He must really respect Ichigo if he's not gonna go after Ichigo's loved ones like normal hollows do. So, how long till Ichigo takes over again? Tatsuki queried. Urahara shrugged. Cazador mentioned that they fight once every other week, so probably in 2 weeks' time. 2 weeks, Tatsuki repeated. What if Aizen takes advantage and attacks? What are we going to tell the Shinigami? Inoue pointed out. I'll tell them that Ichigo's undergoing 2 weeks of non-stop training with Yoruichi, Urahara replied, having already thought of that eventuality. As for Aizen Sosuke, I think, once he hears the news, he'll try to recruit Cazador with the lure of power. He gave a downright mischievous smirk. But he'll be in for a surprise. At that very moment, Cazador sat back against a tree, in a forest he'd found, his hunger fully sated for the time being. The trees in this forest were made of quartz, however. That hit the spot. He'd just finished eating a few dozen jillion. Cazador didn't want to fight any Ajukas yet until he'd gotten the hang of his Bankai form. For that matter, he wasn't quite sure how to get to that form again. He'd tried using Bankai the way Ichigo and he used to, but nothing had happened. Cazador sighed, and with a few moments of focus, summoned Zangetsu's spirit to manifest in front of him. Oi, Zangetsu, what's the deal? Why can't I use Bankai? Bankai is a Shinigami skill, and you are not a Shinigami. You are not even Vizard. You are Arankar, and therefore must release the way they do, Zangetsu explained simply. And how do I do that? Cazador demanded, frustrated. And does this mean I can't use any of the old Shinigami skills anymore? No Kido, no Getsuga Tenshou, no Shunpo, nothing. My power is still the Getsuga Tenshou, Zangetsu informed his hollow wielder, and your Kido is still usable, though weaker than if Ichigo were using them. Shunpo may be a bit more difficult, though I would look into the hollow equivalent. In regards to releasing as an Arankar, perhaps you should go ask. With that, he disappeared. Despite his irritation, Cazador knew he'd get nothing more out of the sword spirit. He couldn't help but get the feeling that he should already know the answer, like it was on the tip of his tongue, but Cazador just couldn't put the words to it. He suddenly snorted. I wonder if Ichigo felt like this when he was trying for Shikai, and he couldn't hear Zangetsu's name. Cazador sat and crossed his legs, thinking back to when he remembered Grimmjow release. Grind, Pantera, he murmured. Huh, that sounds like a Shikai release more than anything else. Ichigo and I got our Shikai with just Zangetsu's name, well, worth a shot. The Arrancar stood up, brushed off his pants, and gripped his blade. Zangetsu, he cried out. His sword thrummed in his hand, but it did not suddenly become tense as Zangetsu. Damn it, I'm close, I can feel it. Ugh, my head, I wonder if this is what a hangover feels like. Ichigo, that you? Who else would it be, you overgrown infection? Yep, it's you. You certainly recovered faster than I did. I was out for a week, you were only out for a day. Color me impressed. You have no color, remember. So it'll be easy. Cazador grinned when he heard Ichigo groan. I think it's because you and Zangetsu were originally part of my soul, not the other way around. And I don't have to fight Zangetsu to manifest, we are both here at the same time. Or at least, I think he is. Oh, there he is, fighting off is that? Kami damn it, Cazador. What are all these Jillian doing in my head? Our head, Cazador corrected. Fine, granted, you are in control, so let me reiterate. What are all these Jillian doing in our head? That's 'cause I ate them. Their power is supposed to be added in mine, though I haven't felt any boost yet. Ignoring the question of just how you eat a hollow the size of a skyscraper when you're only the size of a human being, I suppose I'm just going to have to put down those hollows, nay. Zangetsu, hold up a sec. Have fun, Cazador replied cheerfully. Still feeling rather full, and not wanting to risk a stomach ache, he decided to go explore the forest a bit. He hadn't gotten far when suddenly he felt an extremely minor boost to his power. Ichigo, did you just finish killing one of the Jillians? Getsuga Tenshou. Yeah, why do you ask? Keep it quick, I'm a bit busy here. Cazador once again felt another boost, though like before, it was tiny compared to what he already had. Never mind, just keep doing what you're doing. Why, thank you for giving me permission. Hato 33. Sukatsui. Cazador mentally cut the connection, thinking privately now as he continued on. Interesting. Apparently Ichigo and I have to work together for me to get stronger. I eat the hollow, he slays it in the inner world so it doesn't have a chance to take over. I get the power, he gets the experience I do. So we're both going to get stronger from this. He grinned. Now I'm looking forward to that fight even more. A figure suddenly appeared a few meters in front of him. Who are you? The figure was human-shaped, with an antelope-like hollow mask, a fur coat, and a heavily used, torn Shinigami robe. Cazador's eyes narrowed, betrayal in his eyes. Vizard, I should have known it was too good to be true. He leapt back and readied his Zanpakuto for battle. Vizard, the figure shook his head. No, but who, or rather what, are you? You appear human, yet your Reiatsu has elements of both hollow and Shinigami. Cazador quietly assessed the figure's Reiatsu. It was quite high, but didn't have a trace of hollow power in it. Huh, just a powerful Shinigami then. Have you never heard of an Arrancar? Broken mask, hollow hole, Zanpakuto, human figure. He asked, using one hand to point at each characteristic as he identified them. Otherwise known as a hollow with Shinigami-like powers. I have heard of them, but you are the first one I have ever seen, the figure admitted. All the Arrancar I have heard of live above here. Cazador blinked. Above, he looked straight up. Sure enough, there was a ceiling, which appeared to be supported by the thick quartz trees growing around. Huh, imagine that. I'm new here, only arrived yesterday or so I'm still learning my way around. We are in Maino's forest. Here is where General Hollow, Jillian and some Ijukas reside. The other Ijukas, all the Vasto Lord and Arrancar live above, the figure explained shortly. Cazador merely nodded. This is good information to have. So, what do I call ya, stranger? Ashido. Cazador de la Luna. Tell me then, Cazador, at what level of hollow evolution are you? Cazador looked up, thoughtful. If I had to say, Jillian. Maybe Ijukas. It's impossible for me to tell for sure, as I can't exactly look at myself and go, oh, I'm hundreds of feet tall. I must be a Jillian. Or, oh, I was a Jillian once, but now I'm smaller, faster and stronger. I must be an Ijukas. I see. Your Reiatsu levels betray you, though. You have sufficient Reiatsu to be considered a low to mid-level Ijukas, Ashido pointed out. Cazador looked a bit sheepish of all things. Well, ya didn't ask me how strong I was, just which level of hollow evolution I was at. As for my high Reiatsu levels, long story, don't want to get into it. The Shinigami appeared to stare through the mask at Cazador, as if assessing him. You seem different from most hollows. Much less crazed, at the very least. You haven't seen me get battle lust yet, Cazador replied with a wave of his hand. I do enjoy my battles, but you're the first intelligent conversation I've had in quite some time. Hey, Cazador had to suppress the urge to laugh at Ichigo's offended tone. There is also the fact that I am quite sated with the Jillian I ate earlier. Still digesting, as it were. I would imagine that the fact that I have Shinigami powers also lessens the hunger that hollows feel, but I wouldn't know for sure as I don't recall ever being a normal hollow. I am Shinigami, the hollow's natural enemy. Why aren't you attacking, to make sure I don't purify you? Ashido sounded almost puzzled behind the mask and nigh emotionless voice. Cazador grinned. For one, you aren't a sufficient threat. While I'm sure you would make for an interesting battle, the fact that you aren't attacking me says that you're not interested in a fight, which makes me uninterested in fighting you. I see. Do you plan on returning to the human world? Cazador noticed that the man had subtly tensed. He'll probably attack depending on the answer. No matter, I'll stick with the truth. Not really. Complicated situation, that. The Shinigami relaxed. Then we have no reason to fight. Goodbye. He shunpoed away before Cazador could say a word. Huh. Cazador scratched his head. Odd guy, that Ashido. Wonder what a Shinigami is doing here, though. Aside from Aizen and his group, you mean. Didn't you see his bare feet and torn robes? He's obviously been here for quite some time. Probably left for dead by Soul Society, Ichigo reasoned. Yet another reason not to like them. How ya doing on those hollow? They're dead now. They weren't that hard, Cazador, you know that. Yeah, say. Any idea how to release Zangetsu? What? You can't use Bankai. Indeed he cannot. He is an Arrancar, and therefore must use the Arrancar release, Zangetsu explained. Makes sense. Care to join us, Cazador? It's a little strange talking at the sky. I'll be right there. With a mental tug, he pulled himself into the inner world. Welcome back, temporary king, Ichigo greeted with a bow. Nice outfit. Glad to see you're finally looking different from me. Was beginning to think you had a thing for me. Wouldn't that make you a narcissist? Cazador shot back with a smirk. Anyway, any ideas? What the hell happened to your voice? Ichigo asked, surprised. You sound, well, a lot more like me. Ah, I think that's because I'm in my Arrancar form, Cazador postulated. I'm pretty sure I'll get my old voice back when I use Resurrection. Speaking thereof, answer the damn question. Ichigo looked up at the night sky in their inner world and scratched his chin. Well, Grimmjow used a release phrase in the name of his Zanpakuto, like a Shinigami using Shikai. Cazador shook his head. I already thought of that. We got our Shikai just by knowing and saying our sword's name. Tried it, nothing happened. Well, seeing as how Zangetsu looks the same, and appears to have the same name, it's not a problem with that part, Ichigo reasoned. Zangetsu, I've wondered for a while now. Everyone else seems to have a release phrase. I mean, Hitsugaya has that, sit upon the frozen heavens, Hiranmara, and Rukia has, dance, Soda no Shirayuki. Hell, even Byakuya has, scatter, Senbon Sakura. Do you have a release phrase? I do, Zangetsu acknowledged. You did not need it as a Shinigami, as I am a constant release type Zanpakuto. You would have only used it once, which I find impractical. That, and you were extremely new to the Shinigami business. Would you have really taken a pose and said some release phrase with my name? Ichigo looked away, silently answering the question. So, what's the release phrase? Cazador asked eagerly. A minute later, Cazador re-emerged from his inner world with a maniacal grin. Now, who to test it on? he suddenly sensed a large increase in Reiatsu. Ooh, someone strong's fighting. Feels kinda familiar, too. He dashed in the direction of the Reiatsu, grin even wider than before. A dimension away, Chad checked the clock. 11:45, it's almost time. A couple of the farmers peered through the windows. I see the bastards, one of them said. Everyone ready? The group nodded as one. Chad stood up and activated El Brazo Direct del Gigante. Remember the plan, Chad rumbled lowly. You all distract, I use my high-speed technique to dash in and save him, then we all present a show of force. A few minutes later, they heard a voice. Come on out, you pacifistic cowards. Several people's fists clenched, but once more they heard Chad murmur, remember the plan. They quietly exited, and several of them gasped. Oh sweet Cammy, how could they? Those bastards. I think I'm gonna be sick. Time to go. Chad slipped out the back and used Paso del Viento, speeding towards his abuelo, only to be stopped by a Shinigami blocking his path with Shunpo. What the hell? You will go no further. The Shinigami stated with a bloodthirsty grin. Once more, Chad felt his left arm tingle as anger filled him. That is my grandfather there, Chad protested with a deathly calm, his eyes narrowed as he surveyed the situation. Two more Shinigami, both apparently low level. They don't have Fukutecho sashes, a couple of dozen normal gang members. He couldn't see his abuelo yet, everyone was blocking his sight. Oh really? The Shinigami cackled. Hey boys, we got the old man's grandson here to watch the show. I'm taking him. No you're not, the Shinigami grinned, drawing his Zanpakuto. You're going to stay right there and watch him die. You're in my way, Chad commented, his voice beginning to thicken in anger. El Brazo Direct del Gigante tense, his fists clenched. Move. Make me. The Shinigami taunted. I'm a Shinigami, you're just a fucking peasant. Hey boys, get the old man ready. Without warning, Chad's right fist slammed into the Shinigami's head, empowered further by Chad's Reiatsu. The Shinigami went flying. Here's how things are going to work, Chad said quietly, his anger palpable as his Reiatsu levels rose. I'm getting my abuelo. You are all going to move, or I will smash you the same way I did that Shinigami. Am I understood? Perhaps you should see your abuelo first, before you make any decisions like that, a second Shinigami suggested with a smirk. Bring him out front. As soon as Chad saw Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa, his eyes widened. The poor man's body bore the scars of intense torture, he was emaciated, but worst of all, his arms had been cut off, and then his shoulder burned to keep the man from bleeding to death. He was thrown to the ground by the two people who had brought him out front. Abuelo, the man was unconscious. Chad's eyes closed as hot tears trailed down his cheeks, and cold rage filled his soul as he kept his head bowed. You are all, Chad's head came up, his sole visible eye burning with an unholy anger. You are all going to pay for what you've done. He held his left arm up, and a white substance emerged from his left first, traveling up Chad's arm to his shoulder, and forming a slightly curved spike. A single red stripe traveled from his fist to his shoulder as well, circling the spike. El Brazo Izquierda del Diablo, Chad named his new arm, making a fist with it and feeling the sheer power flowing through it. Symbol of my will to attack. Fancy name, a random gang member commented. What's it gonna do? Following his instinct and his desire for vengeance, Chad focused his Reiatsu into the tips of the 5 fingers of his left hand, and then clenched his fist. With a single Reiatsu-enhanced jump, he was above the mob, falling directly towards the center, his left arm cocked back. Everyone moved out of his way. It won't matter, Chad thought darkly. You will all pay dearly. He punched the ground as he landed. Lemuert. For a moment, nothing happened, but then the ground was pressed down over a meter deep in a pattern that was not immediately recognizable. But Chad knew that if someone were to take an aerial look, it would be easily seen as a huge skull, a circle 2 meters wide surrounding the point of impact forming the mouth. A moment later, the screaming started. In that single move, Chad had obliterated the majority of the gang members who had come. Those who had been caught in the pattern had been crushed into an almost unrecognizable mass of flesh, blood and bone. Only 2 lucky gang members had had the foresight to move further away, both of whom were the conscious Shinigami. Monster. One of the Shinigami cried out in horror, turning to run away. The other quickly joined him. Chad used Paso del Viento to appear directly in front of the Shinigami, scaring them even further. "And where do you think you're going?" Chad queried in a pseudo-calm voice. "Do you honestly think you can run from me?" The Shinigami, in their panic, drew their Zanpakuto and tried to cut Chad down from either side, hoping their teamwork would pull them through. Chad merely blocked with his armored arms. They weren't even scratched. "I will have justice," Chad announced loudly. "You have tortured, maimed, and almost killed my abuelo. And for what? Fun. To simply kill you seems far too quick a release for monsters like you." Chad quickly snatched the Zanpakuto and broke them in two in one stroke with his empowered arms. Then he gripped each Shinigami by the neck tightly and held them up. "No. Instead, I will hunt you. You will never know peace. The first time I catch you, you will lose your thumbs, denying you the use of your swords. The second time, I will break every single bone in your fingers before I crush them into powder. The third, I will do the same to your toes. If I see you again after that, I will cut off your hands, and then your feet. You will lose more and more parts of your body until you are nothing more than a torso and a head, and then I will leave you for a few years with these gentlemen before I have my friend restore your body so we can do it all over again." Chad glared at them with all his might, putting on his most demonic aura, letting his hollow-like Reiatsu flow freely around him. Judging by the slowly growing wet spots on the Shinigami robes, he had made his point. Live in fear, always looking over your shoulder, and you may survive another day with all your limbs intact. And if you dare to commit suicide, let's just say that not even death can save you from my fury, Chad uttered, throwing them to the ground. You have 15 seconds to get out of my sight. Take your friend with you. Eyes wide, both Shinigami scrambled to their feet and hightailed it out of there, quickly gathering their friend before using Shunpo to go as fast as they could in any direction. Chad sighed before releasing his arm's transformations, returning them to normal. He had no intention of following through on his words. "Yoruichi-sensei, I know you're there." A black cat appeared by his side as though it had always been there. "Chad-kun, you can be pretty scary when you want to be. Yoruichi-sensei, please alert your protege, Soifun Taicho, to take them in for questioning, please. One step ahead of you. Those Shinigami have already been caught by the Onimitsukido." Yoruichi's voice sounded almost smug in her cat form. "I have one more request. Please travel to the human world and get Orihime, she can restore his arms. I wish to stay here to care for my abuelo in the meantime." "No problem. See you soon, Chad-kun." The cat Shunpo-ed away, and Chad sighed again to himself before turning to the people who Oscar Joaquin had recruited to help in his vision. To their credit, they had already begun carrying their leader inside. Chad quietly approached, unsure if he was welcome after the gruesome display he'd put on. "How is he?" he murmured. "Not good at the moment, but you'd be surprised what we can live through now that we're dead," one of the stronger-looking men said firmly. "We can mostly fix him up with enough time, but his arms are gone for good, I'm afraid." "One of my friends is capable of restoring his limbs," Chad contradicted. "She'll be here in the next few days, depending on how fast the messenger travels. Would you mind if I stay here with you for the moment? I will earn my keep. I want to see and talk to my abuelo when he awakens." Several of the men exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, one of them shrugged. "You did what you did because of your anger, right? As long as you keep your temper under control, and help us out in the field, it's fine by me." One by one, the others voiced their agreements. Chad bowed low to them. "Thank you." His emotions were a whirlwind, but right now he felt grateful and confused. That power. He stayed outside as everyone else either went to continue their farming, or stayed behind to help nurse Oscar Joaquin back to health. He sat down on the porch and looked at his now bare left arm. "What happened to me? I would never act like that normally. I don't kill. Then again, I'm never that angry, and it did happen to my abuelo, that made it personal." "No," Chad murmured, shaking his head. "Abuelo's teachings, my vow to never use my strength for anything but defense of another. I'm glad abuelo didn't see that. He hung his head in shame. He would be so ashamed of me. I'm glad I finally activated the arm, but is this power worth the price?" He stood up again. "It's a good thing I saved abuelo. I could use his advice." I hope he wakes soon. Determined to keep his mind off his troubling problem, he set off to go help the other men in the fields. That night, in Karakura town, Hitsugaya Toshiro raised one brow in skepticism. Urahara-san, you honestly expect me to believe that Kurosaki Ichigo just up and left for a 2-week session with Yoruichi? Does it matter if you believe it? Urahara asked cheerfully. That's the official report you have to make to the Saotaicho. According to Urahara Kazuki, Kurosaki Ichigo agreed to spend 2 weeks with Shihoin Yoruichi for emergency training, leaving Karakura town in the capable hands of several other Shinigami. Fine, that'll be the official report, Hitsugaya grumbled. Now can you tell me the truth? What happened to Kurosaki-san? I have no idea what you're talking about, Urahara replied, pulling out a small fan and holding it up to hide his mischievous smile. Urahara, I know he has hollow powers, and I'm not going to tell the Saotaicho, Hitsugaya said bluntly, hoping the shock factor would cause the shopkeeper to reveal something. What happened? Urahara blinked, folded his fan and sighed. Very well, this must stay with us, I hope you realize. And if I find that you have told anyone, even another Taicho, he narrowed his eyes, giving his most serious look. I will find you. Not even the Saotaicho would be able to protect you from me, and no one from Soul Society will ever find us again. Hitsugaya merely nodded. Ichigo-kun has temporarily become a hollow. What? The 10th Division Taicho yelped uncharacteristically. How did this happen? How do you know it's temporary? Is he still here? Is he going to fight us? Ma, keep it quiet, Urahara shushed. In order, his inner hollow fought him for control and won. I know it's temporary because the hollow form of Ichigo said it was, which matched up with what Ichigo himself told me. No, he's in Hueco Mundo, and is more interested in eating other hollows to get stronger right now. Hitsugaya took a deep breath and resumed his normal calm features. Is he going to join Aizen? The banished Shinigami shook his head negatively. No, Cazador, that's the name of Ichigo's hollow form, said he didn't like taking orders from anyone but Ichigo. So relax, go with the official story. He'll be back in a couple of weeks, stronger than ever. All right, I need to go file the official report now, so goodbye, Urahara-san. Hitsugaya shunpo-ed away. Blood dripped freely onto the floor as Ishida Ryu fell to his knees, physically and spiritually exhausted. His Quincy bow flickered, then dissipated into spirit particles as Ryu's concentration slipped. His fingers had been cut into so much that he had no strength left to pull back and fire arrows. He had used all of his Quincy spirit capsules, and his body felt like it was burning from the inside out for gathering large quantities of spiritual energy from his surroundings for such a prolonged fight. Ryu had nothing left. He had gone far past his limit, and it was all he could do to stay conscious. Even that fight, he was slowly losing, as blood slowly poured from his wounds. From now on, I will bring more medicine, he weakly swore to himself. HMPH, Ishida Ryukin said calmly, though he was not without wounds himself. He had been pierced a few times in his legs, and once in his left shoulder. The wounds weren't deep. His own Reiatsu gathering skills allowed him to absorb or use arrows before they could punch completely through. I won't admit it aloud, but my son has progressed very quickly during this fight. It looks like he's reached his limit though. Perhaps next time you will actually be a challenge. While he said it in his usual monotone, he meant it as a compliment. To have progressed so quickly now, I wonder how skilled you will be when you heal from this encounter. Next time, with that, Ryu lost the fight, and fell over, unconscious. Ryukin swiftly picked him up and used Herenkyaku to take him to the medical station in the Quincy Underground training chamber. With modern medicine combined with Quincy spiritual healing skills, Ryu would be completely healed in a day or two. Foolish Ryu, if anyone was nearby and conscious enough to hear that, they might have heard the undertone of parental concern as Ryukin tended to his son's wounds. Cazador finally made it to the source of the Reiatsu he'd sensed before. He had been sidetracked by a fit of hunger, and gone on another Jillian eating spree to satisfy his appetite. By the time he'd finished, the Reiatsu was gone. At first, Cazador had been disappointed, but after a while the Reiatsu clashed again, this time nearer than before. Hiding behind a tree and suppressing his Reiatsu as best he could, he got a good look of who was fighting. To his surprise, he saw two Arankar going at it, one of whom Cazador recognized. The Sexta Espada, Grimjow Jagerjaquez, was fighting a tall, lean Arankar. The Arankar had an eye patch on his left eye and had a spoon-like hood that looked more decorative than anything else, as it did nothing to hide or protect his bone-straight black hair. The Arankar also wielded a unique weapon that would have resembled a spear, were it not for the crescent moon-shaped blade pointing outwards from the end. There was an identical blade pointing inwards, fused to the back of the other blade. In Cazador's opinion, it was a very impractical weapon for most things. I mean, seriously, that looks like it's meant for beheading, seeing as the sharp end is on the inside of those blades. I could see it being on a wall somewhere as a ceremonial weapon, Ichigo contributed. And I dunno, if someone knew how to use it that could be quite useful. I suppose you could use the tips of that thing for stabbing and tearing, Cazador conceded, eyeing the weapon. I was thinking that in order to block it with a normal sword, stop it in its tracks, they would have to get inside that crescent, Ichigo pointed out. A quick sideways tug and then slice. Off with the enemy's head. Fair point. What about the inside blade then, the one pointing back at the guy? Maybe for if he gets too close. Ichigo suggested. After all, the weakness of any spear user is if someone gets too close for them to stab. More than that, I'm wondering who that other Espada is. He's gotta be an Espada if he's giving Grimjow a hard time, though the latter hasn't used Resurrección yet. We should keep watching, see if one of them kills the other. That would make our lives a lot easier in the long run. Cazador frowned. Ichigo had a point. If their enemies were killing each other off, why interfere? They do seem to be somewhat equally matched, he observed, seeing Grimjow use his Zanpakuto to knock the strange weapon upwards long enough for his left hand to fire a red Sero blast at point-blank range. The unknown Arankar was mildly burned, but had a manic grin on his face as he continued attacking Grimjow from out of the smoke, landing a cut on the blue-haired Espada's left arm. Grimjow did say before that he was on par with the fourth Espada, Ulquiorra, Ichigo recalled. Since this is obviously not Ulquiorra, this is probably the fifth Espada, Cazador finished with a grin. Unless he's gotten strong enough to take on the third, which is doubtful. Do we have the power to take him on? We might, if I use Resurrección. If we let them weaken each other first, though. Cazador could sense Ichigo considering. While it could work, I don't like the idea. That's not how I want to fight my battles. Me either, but it's an unusual opportunity to eliminate an Espada. Cazador rationalized. After another moment, Ichigo made his decision. Let's not attack yet. We don't recognize that fifth Espada, right? That means he's not attacked us, and I don't think either of us wants to just kill someone like that when he's not ready to fight at his best. Who knows? Maybe he'll work with us. What if Grimjow wins? He did invade earlier with the sole purpose of killing us and your friends. Ichigo's voice hardened. If Grimjow wins, I'll leave it to you. If you want to kill him and eat him, fine. His power will be a good addition. If not, then maybe he'll make an appropriate ally against Aizen. He did seem to hate him when we fought. Cazador nodded silently. I've had it with you, Neutra. Grimjow yelled, frustrated. I'm trying to get a good bite to eat, and you keep attacking me. Then kill me if you can, kitty. The now named Neutra replied with a wide grin, attempting to skewer his opponent, who skillfully dodged. Let me kill you. Grimjow slowly began to smile. Aizen won't like this, he said seriously, although his own lust for battle was beginning to make itself known as the pressure of his spiritual energy grew larger. Aizen can kiss my ass. Neutra replied. Now get serious. I want to see if you really have the power to take me on. You asked for it. Grimjow jumped back and brought his blade across his body, as though going for a sweeping slice. He took his other hand and ground his nails across the blade. Grind, Pantera. Reiatsu surrounded him, and when it disappeared, he was in his Resurrección form, exactly how Cazador remembered it. Oh, good. Let's see if your might compares to mine. Pray, Santa Teresa, Neutra howled. When the smoke cleared, he looked almost exactly the same, except he now had 4 arms, and a curved pair of horns atop his head, the left longer than the right, resembling a crescent moon. The spoon-like hood was gone, and Neutra's unique weapon was gone. Each hand held an enormous scythe-like weapon. Interesting, Cazador thought with a grin. Looks like speed versus power. Who do you think will win, Ichigo? My bet's on Grimmjow. That depends. Is Grimmjow strong enough to punch through Neutra's Hierro? Or is Neutra fast enough to catch Grimmjow with at least one of his arms? Grimmjow was on par with our single Bankai Vizard form, Ichigo reminded him. Grimmjow stiffened, his panther-like senses alerting him to a new smell. Neutra, there's another Arrancar over there. A strong one, too. Might even be a challenge for you. Maybe it's one of Aizen's. As much as Neutra wanted to fight Grimmjow, he wasn't stupid. If there was a strong Arrancar nearby, that meant two things. Either Aizen was spying on them, or there was an Arrancar that could be competition. In either case, he had to die if Neutra wanted to continue his fight with Grimmjow. Pesquisa, he murmured, putting a finger to the ground and pulsing with his Reiatsu. A few moments later, he stood up again. Yeah, definitely a strong one. Feels like a complete Arrancar, like us. Come out, Arrancar. Gladly, I was getting tired of sitting and watching. Cazador leapt out and stood a distance away from the others. Even I know these are bad odds. Grimmjow was agape. What, Kurosaki, you're an Arrancar. Lie, tell him I'm not here. Ichigo practically screamed in his head. No shit, actually, I'm Cazador. Kurosaki, who's that? Cazador queried convincingly. Must have lost your memories when you turned into a hollow, Grimmjow muttered, thinking aloud. Also explains your power, and could explain why you're an Arrancar, although who was powerful and gutsy enough to turn a Shinigami of your old strength into a hollow is someone I don't want to mess with. Speak for yourself, Neutra argued. That sounds like a great fight. As much as I enjoy being talked about right in front of me, Cazador began irritably, why don't you introduce yourselves? Grimmjow, the blue-haired Arrancar introduced himself, feeling a little odd for speaking to someone who looked exactly the person who he was training to defeat. Quinta Espada, working for Aizen Sosuke. Neutra, Quarta Espada, the other said easily. How long have you been a hollow? Grimmjow queried. Not long, Cazador replied. Maybe a day or two. Hard to tell time here. A day, and you're an Ajukas? Neutra asked incredulously. He has to die. He might even become Vasto Lord before me if he continues like this. Cazador shrugged. Ajuka's level, maybe. I think I'm just a Jillian though. Was eating those earlier, and they filled me up. Die. Neutra cried out, as he used Sonido to attack Cazador from the side, swiping at him with his two left arms. Cazador's eyes widened, and called on his Shinigami power to use Shunpo, just managing to get out of range. He grinned. You want a fight? You've got one. He drew Zangetsu from his back, the cloth wrapping around his right arm as he held Zangetsu horizontally, in the same position in which Ichigo would use Bankai. His eyes gleamed with excitement as he looked down his sword at Neutra. Tear the sky asunder, Zangetsu. Chapter 10. Evolution. When Cazador re-emerged from the plume of Reiatsu his Resurrection had created, he had transformed into a mixture between his Arrancar form, which was essentially human in shape, and his anthropomorphic lizard-like body that he had first found himself in when Cazador won against Ichigo. His vest was gone, instead replaced by a white scale-like armor with intricate red tattoo-like markings that began from his hollow hole. The armor encompassed Cazador's entire torso, but ended at the shoulders, where frills that would befit any lizard grew to either side and around the back of his neck. Cazador's hair was longer now, down to his shoulders in length. Down his arms were crimson wavy lines, exactly as they had been in Cazador's original hollow form. His hands grew slimmer and longer, resembling claws, while his bare feet had changed shape, each foot now having 3 claws, like a bird's talon or a reptile's hind claw. His crimson leggings had gained a white pattern to the mirroring that of the crimson on white of his armor. Behind Cazador was a thick, powerful white tail about 5 feet long, with the same blood-red wave pattern as on his arms, though the tip was purely that red color. The tail was only about 2/3 as long as the one his purely hollow form had had, but Cazador was glad for that. It was just long enough to be useful in battle, without being so long that it could easily be used against him. Cazador's mask had changed as well, reforming the top half, down to the upper jaw, so only Cazador's lower jaw to his chin was visible. The left half was almost completely red, with only a few traces of white, and the right half was white as bone. Zangetsu had become Tensa Zangetsu, the familiar black Japanese long sword that had led Ichigo to defeat Kuchiki Byakuya and Cazador himself. Cazador smirked arrogantly as he held Tensa Zangetsu in his hand, confident in his win. You want to play, Neutra? Let's play. Inwardly, Cazador was glad his voice had returned to his own hollow voice. It felt strange hearing Ichigo's tones from his own lips. Not a bad resurrection, Neutra admitted. You might even be able to beat the old cat over there. Grimmjow growled. But there's no way you can cut through my hierro. Cazador grinned wickedly even while listening to Ichigo talk rapidly in his head. You're in full-blown hollow form now. I don't think you can use much, if any, Shinigami powers here. No Kido, no Shunpo, Ichigo thought quickly. You were correct, Zangetsu concurred. The Shinigami power left within your body is insufficient for any practical usage, save identifying you as an Arrancar. Well, that sucks. Guess it's time to wing it then. Cazador dashed with all his resurrection given speed at Neutra, and this speed was not insignificant, even minus Shunpo. It was on par with Ichigo's Shinigami form Shunpo speed. He swung Tensa Zangetsu, only to be blocked by two of Neutra's scythes, and two more were swinging back at him. Move, damn it, Cazador demanded of his body, pumping Reiatsu through it. To his surprise, his hollow Reiatsu instinctively formed a pattern based on Cazador's need, and he found himself out of the scythes. Reach, a sudden minor booming sound echoing from where he'd been. What was that? Ichigo demanded. That almost sounded like you broke the sound barrier. Grimmjow smirked, recognizing Cazador's sudden stop as surprise. Was that your first time using Sonido? Sonido, Cazador repeated, burning the word to memory. Must be that high-speed technique I just accidentally used. I imagine that most basic hollow techniques are first done instinctually, Ichigo mused. We can ponder it later. Right now, I have someone to fight. No matter, Cazador replied to Grimmjow with a wider grin than before. Now for the ultimate question, strength or speed. He disappeared in a burst of resurrection-enhanced Sonido, appearing behind Neutra and slashing with all his strength. Unexpectedly, Neutra used the top two of his forearms to block by flipping his scythes over his shoulders, catching Tensa Zangetsu even as Neutra moved to try to tear Cazador's weapon out of his grasp. Cazador Sonido-ed away just in time to avoid being cleaved in two by the third of Neutra's arms. Unwilling to give up the fight, Cazador reappeared at Neutra's left side. Getsuga Tenshou. Neutra didn't even get the time to curse as one of his arms completely obliterated by the technique, though he did manage to Sonido away before his torso was injured. Damn, he's better than I thought. I must kill him, or he will kill me. If not now, then when he has evolved to a Jukas. Neutra thought furiously, channeling his Reiatsu to the stump of his missing arm. I'll just save this for when I have an opportunity. Getsuga Tenshou, Cazador cried, suddenly appearing within Neutra's guard, too fast for the Espada to block or counter. Or so Cazador thought. Suddenly, he was impaled in the stomach, through his scale-like armor, by another hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. I know I destroyed one. What the hell? Ignoring the pain, he tried to cut off Neutra's head with his blade. Neutra used the hand to throw Cazador away before he could finish decapitating his foe. Regeneration is such a useful ability, Neutra gloated confidently. With my hierro powerful to stop most anything, and my regeneration to quickly heal up anything that gets through, I'm unstoppable. Cazador got to his feet, his own high-speed regeneration already mostly done healing up his injury. What do you know? Sounds like we have something in common, Cazador observed with a maniacal grin. I know it takes quite a lot of Reiatsu to regenerate an injury, especially one as grievous as losing an arm. So tell me, Neutra. He hooked the end chain link from the hilt of Tensa Zangetsu on one of his fingers and began twirling it around, building up another Getsuga. How many times can you regenerate it before you're out of power? I won't need to, Neutra cried out in success, seeing Cazador's open stance as a sign of weakness, rushing in and attempting to slice Cazador in three with his two right arms. Cazador merely disappeared, reappearing behind Neutra, and slightly to the left. Too slow. Getsuga Tenshou. Neutra was suddenly hit point-blank by an extremely powerful Getsuga, even more powerful than the one that had taken his arm. It sliced into his back, cutting very deeply into it despite his Hierro. However, between his Hierro and regeneration abilities, Neutra was not out of the fight yet, and spun around on his heel to cut off Cazador's left hand. Cazador completely ignored the loss of his free hand and stabbed with his sword, which was glowing darkly with the power of yet another Getsuga. It pierced Neutra's right shoulder before Cazador viciously swung downwards, cutting off both of Neutra's arms this time before disappearing with Sonido, reappearing on the other side and using a point-blank Getsuga to completely obliterate the other two of Neutra's arms. Cazador barely used Sonido in time to narrow avoid being impaled in the stomach again by a third arm on Neutra's left. Wait, what? He backed off to regenerate his free hand, and to figure out what had just happened. Hiding your power, are we? Neutra extended the third left arm, and then a third right arm. Yeah, I have 6 arms, not just 4. With a flick of his wrists, the other two suddenly had scythes of their own. It's a pity I didn't catch you with that. You truly are quite fast, but I refuse to lose to a newborn hollow. Grimjow watched with narrowed eyes. A battle of attrition, it looks like, he thought to himself. They both have regeneration, and they're both insane enough to completely ignore any wounds that don't interfere with their ability to attack. Hey, Cazador chuckled, no matter, I'm faster than you, and I can cut you. Your Hierro means nothing to me. All you have are 6 weapons. You've lost this one way or another. If you win, you've succeeded in taking out a Jillian Arankar. Well done, he added mockingly. If you lose, it's even worse. Who cares about reputation? Neutra countered. I just want a good fight. Cazador grinned widely. Now you're talking. Getsuga Tenshou. Neutra put all of his arms up to block the Getsuga, using his weapons to hide the fact that his mouth was open, and his tongue, tattooed with the number 5, was sticking out. He quickly charged a Sero and fired, moving his weapons just out of the way. The Sero pierced through the Getsuga, covering most of the distance to Cazador before he realized what was happening. It took Cazador by surprise, but Cazador narrowly managed to escape the full brunt of the Sero, losing his left foot despite Sonido. Shunting more Reiatsu to regenerate it, the orange-haired Arankar smirked. A Sero, nice improvisation. Betcha mine is better. Ha, fine then, Jillian, show me your Sero. Noida invited mockingly. His left foot almost completely regenerated now. Cazador put his right foot back, twisting himself so he was looking down his left arm, which was pointed directly at Neutra. He pointed the middle 3 claw-like fingers at his foe and focused his power. A tri-focused crimson orb, spinning clockwise from Cazador's point of view as some of the energy spun off, began growing at the tips of his fingers. Sero, Cazador bellowed triumphantly as he fired it. Neutra's eyes widened as he felt the amount of power in that Sero, and he knew, even if he would never admit it, that his own Sero didn't match up. The Espada-only Gran Rey Sero would completely dominate it, however Neutra didn't want Aizen to interrupt his fun. While fighting regularly occurred among normal hollows, and use of resurrection could be attributed to training, the Gran Rey Sero was expressly forbidden in Las Noches, and even use of it in Manos Forest would prompt an immediate investigation, and test to see if the opponent was worthy of joining the Espada. This was the last thing Neutra wanted to happen. Neutra managed to dodge, but once again lost one of his arms, in this case, the lowest one of his right side. This is getting old, Jillian. Neutra taunted. You hit me, I lose an arm or 2, I hit you, you lose a limb, we both regenerate and start anew. Cazador waggled his fingers at Neutra. Perhaps so, but you apparently haven't realized, I do my damage more consistently, and I have far more Reiatsu left than you do, if my senses are correct. I will win this battle of attrition, and then devour you. Neutra, I'm disappointed, a voice suddenly rang out. Everyone there turned to face a new figure in Aizen's outfit. If Cazador's senses were telling the truth, this character had no hollow power in him whatsoever. This was only enhanced by the fact that Cazador could see glimpses of the usual Shinigami black colors underneath the loose white uniform. Shinigami. Ichigo, is this Aizen? In Cazador's inner world, Ichigo shook his head. That's not Aizen. Not Tucson either, Cazador replied with narrowed eyes, not that anyone could see behind his mask. Must be Ichimaru Jin, the third traitorous Taicho, Ichigo deduced. Cazador quickly inspected the figure. Jin had silver hair with a slight purple tint, while his body was quite slim. His eyes were curiously narrowed to slits, and given the slightly mocking smile on his face, his expression could easily be placed on a fox's face. "Who are you?" Cazador demanded. "Me, I'm Ichimaru Jin," the traitor responded cheerfully. "As you plainly deduced, I work for the same person these two do. It is rather obvious, given that you all wear the same uniform, with minor alterations," Cazador replied sarcastically. "So why are you here? Putting a leash on these two rabid dogs?" Grimjow bristled. "Rabid dog am I?" He only just managed to contain his urge to lunge and try to rip Cazador's throat out. "As soon as Jin's gone, I'm gonna." "You'll do nothing," Jin responded in that same cheerful manner. "Not yet, in any case. Anyways, I've given you my name, what's yours?" "Cazador de la Luna." "Tell me, Cazador, how did you become a complete Arrancar?" Jin asked curiously. "The only ones I've seen are those created through the Haugyuku." Cazador shrugged. "I just remember waking up as a hollow, and when I relaxed I looked rather human." "Maybe there's more than one of these, what did you call them?" "Haugyuku. Whatever, I'm out to go eat some more, fighting made me hungry." "Would you be interested in joining us?" Jin proposed. "If you were able to fight on even grounds with Neutra you'd at least be the Sexta Espada, though you would have to be tested." Grimjow growled at the idea. "He goes, he dies. I will find and eat him, and work my way up to Aizen so I can kill him. Not interested in the least in belonging to any organization in which I'm not the king," Cazador replied bluntly. "You have nothing to offer me, and I don't feel like working for anyone but myself. Even if I did feel like working for someone else, you're obviously a Shinigami, and I bet your ruler is one too. That means that you must have betrayed Soul Society, and how could I trust a traitor not to kill me when my back is turned? No, I refuse to work for you." The smile on Jin's face never dimmed. "Oh well, if that is your choice, I suppose I can't force you." "Grimjow, Neutra, we're going back to Las Noches now. Aizen-sama will be most disappointed. He was anticipating a new, powerful espada since you both felt the need to use Resurrección." Grimjow sighed and returned to his pre-Resurrección state. Neutra did the same after he realized that he wouldn't get to fight anyone now. Seeing this, Cazador followed suit. He wanted to keep his Shinigami skills available, even if they were watered down a bit. "I'm still far more skilled at Shunpo than I am at Sonido," Cazador recognized. "I'll need to practice using Sonido and Sero faster." Ichigo remained silent. He was busy looking through Cazador's eyes, keeping a wary watch for trouble. He and Zangetsu had long since dispatched the hollows that Cazador had consumed. "My, you look exactly like Kurosaki Ichigo," Jin exclaimed in surprise. "I should have realized from the orange hair." Grimjow had the same reaction, Cazador replied. "Maybe he was turned into a hollow, and that became me." "It doesn't matter." Jin's grin grew wider. "Aizen-sama will be most pleased with this information, even if you don't join. I will likely see you later, Cazador de la Luna." He vanished with Shunpo, and the two Espada quickly followed suit. Cazador shrugged. "So, those were the 5th and 6th Espada. HMPH. 7th through 9th must suck almost as bad as Yami. They must have some sort of skills, or they wouldn't have become Espada," Ichigo reminded his alter ego. "Don't underestimate them." "Whatever, I'm gonna go eat some more. Like I said, fighting made me hungry." He grinned. "Time to start going after Ijukas. Orihime-chan." "Wah." Inoue jumped in surprise, spinning around to see Yoruichi the cat. "Don't scare me like that," she said, breathing hard and trying to get her heart to stop trying to hammer its way out of her chest. "Sorry." Yoruichi sounded more amused than anything else. "You up for a trip to Soul Society? Chad found his grandfather, but he needs your special brand of healing. It may take a few days to get there." Inoue's face hardened as she nodded. "All right, let me just pack a lunch, leave a note for Tatsuki, and let's go." Several minutes later, they arrived at Urahara's, and opened the gate to Soul Society. Meanwhile, Chad returned to the farmhouse from working the fields, immediately going to check on his abuelo. He vaguely registered everyone else doing the same. He really is loved by these people, he realized fondly. "Good, how's he doing?" he rumbled to the man who had been tending his abuelo's wounds. Better than we expected, he answered with a smile. His will to live and heal must be quite strong. Chad smiled back. I wouldn't be surprised if it was his will to protect us all. Ha, that would be just like him, wouldn't it? Laughed one of men that Chad had worked with in the fields. Oi, Sato-san, when did you say that your special healer would come by to fix his arms? Another asked. My messenger likely made it to her by now, but she doesn't have a high-speed technique. It will likely take her a few days, Chad murmured. With luck, she arrives before Abuela wakes, and he will never know that he lost his arms at one point. Yeah, the mood turned somber. Masataro, please let us know if Oscar wakes up. The healer smiled and nodded. Chad felt his stomach rumble. He had not eaten since breakfast earlier. Sorry, he muttered. Any chance of some food? Of course. We keep some food in stock just in case anyone with spiritual power comes to us, Masataro replied. A few of the children do, as a matter of fact. Please, go eat. It's the least we could do for you saving our leader. Hitsugaya Tushiro was not having a good day. He'd finished reporting to Yamamoto Saotaicho, and had been denied temporary reinforcements to replace Kurosaki Ichigo's presence. He'd sent Abarai Renji to fetch the Quincy Ishida Ryu to discuss the possibilities and implications. Shortly thereafter, Renji had returned and announced that he couldn't find Ishida, and Rukia couldn't sense his Reiatsu anywhere. Damn it, could this get any worse? Tushiro murmured under his breath. Hitsugaya Taicho, Matsumoto Rangaku, Tushiro's Fukutecho, rushed in. Inoue Orihime has disappeared. I need to learn to stop tempting fate, Tushiro thought bitterly. Are there any clues as to her whereabouts? She did leave a note to her friend Tatsuki. It mentioned that Yoruichi-sama had taken her to Soul Society to heal someone, Rangaku replied swiftly, procuring the note from in between her breasts. So let me make sure I've got this straight. Kurosaki Ichigo is training with Yoruichi-sama, Sato Yasutora has been in Soul Society for an unknown purpose, Ishida Ryu is nowhere to be found, and now Inoue Orihime has gone to Soul Society as well. Tushiro put his forehead down on the table he was working at. So now it's completely up to us to defend Karakura town. I don't like the odds, Taicho, Rangaku conceded. Nor do I, Matsumoto. Nor do I, he looked at her piercingly. You and Rukia find the Quincy. I don't care how you do it, just do it. Yes sir. She disappeared with a flash of Shunpo. Tushiro got up and made his way to the interdimensional communicator. Looks like I need to talk to Soifun Taicho. A few minutes later, Hitsugaya Taicho, I am quite busy. What is it you need? Soifun asked, getting to the point. I need you or one of your Onimitsukido to locate Yasutora Sato, and persuade him to return to Karakura town. In the last 24 hours, both Kurosaki Ichigo and Ishida Ryu have vanished, and they are Taicho-level Ryoka. We need someone to fill in the gap, and Yamamoto Saotaicho has denied my request for Shinigami reinforcement. I understand. I will contact you again when we have located him. Ishida Ryu groaned as he awoke. He began to sit up, trying his best to ignore his aching muscles. Blinking, he located his glasses on a bedside table, and he put them on. The first thing he saw were the bandages on his fingers. Bandages. He suddenly remembered his fight with his father. I see. Chu-san must have healed me after I passed out. He clenched his right hand into a fist. I barely even touched him. Is this my limit? He took a deep breath and calmed himself. Anger is not useful at this moment, Ishida reminded himself. Now I know where I stand in terms of ability. The next step is to analyze my weaknesses from that fight. Coldly, logically, he began to list them. My fingers began to bleed and weaken after my Quincy bow cut through the gloves I wore. Chu-san was able to fire arrows without his second hand. I must work on that. He was also capable of firing far more arrows at once than I can at this time. He was faster than I am with the Harenkyaku, and his arrows were faster, stronger. Ryu nodded to himself. Speed, quantity and quality of arrows, and the ability to fire the Quincy arrows with only one hand. Those were the skills he displayed, along with his incredible tolerance to continuously drawing spiritual energy. He didn't use a single piece of Quincy equipment. No seal schneiders, no silver tubes, nothing but his own bow and arrow. Strength and speed will come with experience, If I understood my father's words correctly, he implied we would fight again. But firing with one hand will take practice. You lay back down, resting. First though, I must finish recovering. I doubt my body can handle drawing any significant amount of spiritual energy for some time. In the meantime, he reached into his backpack, which his father had been kind enough to allow Ryu to bring along, and pulled out one of his school texts. He began to Saint Yudi, feeling rather productive. No, Ishida-san, my Taicho merely wants a status report on your son. Namely, where is he, or lacking that, will he be able to respond to an Erincar attack in the near future? Matsumoto Rangaku asked reasonably. And what makes you think I know where my son is? Ishida Ryukin asked, peering over his hands at the two Shinigami in his office. Because you are both Quincy, and while we may be unable to locate Ishida or you, only a spiritually adept person would know how to hide another, Rukia responded. We have already checked with Urahara Kazuki and his underground chamber, and he suggested that perhaps Ryu-san had come to you for training. That follows what we know of him. That meddler, he did indeed come to me for training, and he is currently recovering. I am not certain when he will be at full health once again, but have you forgotten? Quincy do not like Shinigami. We do not work with Shinigami. Perhaps your time would be better spent getting Shinigami reinforcements. Hitsugaya Taicho has already attempted just that, with failure. The majority of our forces remain in Seoul Society to prevent Aizen's forces from attacking our home, Rangaku explained. Besides, would you not call it necessary to work with us to protect your own home? Karakura town appears to be Aizen's next target. Should it come to that, I will protect the hospital, Ryukin conceded. But why is Ryu so needed? Kurosaki Ichigo, the resident Shinigami representative here for Karakura town, was taken by Yoruichi-sama for emergency training, Rukia replied. Please note that this was not by our decision, it is something the two of them apparently decided to do. That said, he and Ishida Ryu are the only Taicho-level combatants here that are not under a power limiter, Rangaku added. Lacking one is bad, lacking both is a disaster waiting to happen. Unless you or Urahara-san take their place in the event of an invasion, Rukia corrected. If Ryu-san needs to recover from training with you, then your help would certainly be welcome. Urahara-san has declined helping unless absolutely necessary. Then I too, will help only when absolutely necessary, Ryukin said with finality. Ryu will return when he is ready. Rangaku and Rukia glanced at each other, recognizing that they were being dismissed. In tandem, they shunpoed away through an open window. Not good, Rangaku said to Rukia as they dashed back to report to Toshiro. I don't think we'll be allowed to keep our limiters off. You've got it easy, Rukia, you don't have such a limiter. One of the few good things to happen for Nisama keeping me from being promoted to a seated officer, Rukia replied with a sigh. She looked up, her face determined. We'll just need to prove that we can take care of things until Ichigo and Ryu return. Don't you find Ichigo-san's disappearance a little strange? Rangaku queried. I don't know him that well, but he seems like he wouldn't just up and disappear without telling anyone. Rukia nodded. Yeah, but he's also not one to turn down advanced training if it could help protect his friends. If I know him, he's probably training himself to the bone under Yoruichi, like Hitsugaya Taicho said. Last time, he achieved Bankai in just 2 days, and had learned Shunpo. I wonder what he'll be able to do after this training. You're right, Rangaku said, reassured. Rukia was glad at least one of them believed her words. Despite all this, I'm worried, he mentioned that his battle with his inner hollow was only days away. He disappeared right around the time he said he'd have to battle. Could he have lost? She shook her head. No, I can't think about this right now. I've already lost Kaion Dono to a hollow I couldn't protect him from, I won't lose Ichigo too. She looked at the setting sun. Come home soon, Ichigo. Her eyes hardened. Inoue smiled. Hey there, Kenpachi-san. Oh, the incredibly tall Taicho of the 11th Division turned to view his addresser. Hello, Inoue. Is Ichigo with you? He gave a bloodthirsty grin. I'd love to spar with him again. Afraid not, Inoue replied cheerfully. I'm actually on my way heal someone. Yoruichi-sensei said it could take a couple of days to get there. That's too bad, Kenpachi responded. He scrutinized Inoue. You look stronger than before. I am, Inoue replied with a grin. Been training with Kurosaki-kun and Chad, and are you? Now that's interesting, Kenpachi said, his grin returning. Would you care for a spar? If you've been training with Ichigo, even a little bit, you might just be strong enough to take me on. Sorry, Yoruichi, the cat interrupted, but she really does need to go heal Sato Yasutora's grandfather. We won't be back for several days. Nonsense, I'll take her there personally if it means we can spar later, Kenpachi insisted. Yay, Ken-chan gets to fight Big Booby-chan. Yakiru, Kenpachi's extremely childlike Fukutecho, piped up from his shoulder. Hi Yakiru-chan, Inoue greeted. Kenpachi Taicho, don't you have to take care of your squad and toughen him up a bit? Yoruichi argued. Besides, if we were really in a rush, I could take her there faster than you ever could. I'm planning on using this opportunity to train her to discover her own high-speed technique. Bah, she's human, Kenpachi pointed out. She can't use Shunpo, and she can't use whatever hollows use. The only way she's going to get faster is by doing it the same way I do, hard physical training and learning to use Reiatsu to strengthen the legs instinctively. He has a point, Yoruichi-sensei, Inoue reluctantly concurred. My powers are a healing bubble, a defensive shield, and a slicing attack. Between those powers, all of my Shun-Shun-Rika is used. She looked up and put a finger to her chin in thought. I suppose I could ride my Santen Keshun if I needed to, but that would mean sacrificing my defense ability. That depends, Yoruichi pounced on the idea. How large can you make your Santen Keshun? Inoue glanced at her in surprise. I've never really thought about it, actually. I've always just made them large enough to cover what they needed. The largest I've ever done is about Kenpachi-san's height, I suppose. The larger they are, the more Reiatsu they take. Why do you ask? I was thinking that if you could make your shield curved, you could protect yourself while flying on it, Yoruichi suggested. Inoue bit her lip. I'll talk to my Shun-Shun-Rika and see what we can do. Kenpachi, I'm honored that you want to fight me, but I'm afraid our match will have to be postponed. Meh, that's fine. Get stronger. Girl, I want to fight you the same way I fought Ichigo. He grinned. You Ryoka are getting more and more interesting. Later, he stalked off. Bye, Big Booby-chan. Yakiru waved goodbye. Bye, Yakiru-chan. Afterwards, she turned to Yoruichi. In the meantime, let's get to Chad's grandfather. Santen Keshun. Her golden triangular shield appeared, resting a few inches above the ground. Stepping on it lightly, Inoue tested to see if it could support her weight. When it did so without any apparent difficulty, she got fully on it and sat down. Yoruichi-sensei, would you please lead me to Chad? The cat jumped into Inoue's lap. Sure. With a thought, the shield-turned transportation rose up into the air above the buildings and rushed to the exit from Seraiti. Half an hour later, Inoue began to sway, and the shield flickered. Land, Yoruichi commanded. Inoue quickly did so, stepping off her shield before allowing her fairies to return to their hairpin state. Ooh boy, I'm dizzy, Inoue giggled, sitting down and leaning back against a boulder. You've drained too much Reiatsu to continue flying like that, Yoruichi told her. We shall rest here for the night. Well done. By the way, you've taken us almost halfway there. We're in District 36. That's good, Inoue said absently, her eyes drooping from exhaustion. The goddess of Flash took pity on the girl. Sleep, Orihime-chan. All right, and Inoue dropped off in seconds, her head falling forward towards her chest. The cat blinked once and shook her head. I shall keep watch. Ichigo jumped back from the ajukas that Cazador had eaten just a few minutes before. This hollow appeared to be a large human porcupine blend, and its fighting style involved long-distance attacks, usually throwing the spike-like needles that kept regenerating from its back. Ichigo was having a hard time getting close, and the Getsuga Tenshou wasn't fast enough to catch him. At least, not in Shikai form. Ichigo didn't want to go Bankai, not if he didn't have to. He could sense Zangetsu's agreement. Bankai was overkill, while beating the ajukas in Shikai would be a test of skill. Not bad, Ichigo complimented, dodging another set of a dozen spikes. But you're no match for me. Getsuga Tenshou. Haven't you learned by now that that's not going to work? The porcupine Ijukas taunted, nimbly dodging, only to find Zangetsu piercing his head. The Ijukas disintegrated, its power becoming Cazador's. Ichigo shook his head, pulling on the cloth from several meters away. The blade practically leapt back into his hand. Man, Cazador was really onto something when he showed me how useful throwing Zangetsu could be. Indeed, Zangetsu's true spiritual form agreed from nearby. While I do prefer being wielded as a blade instead of as a flail, it is an effective long-distance attack. Especially for high-speed piercing instead of cutting, Ichigo continued with a nod. I prefer the Getsuga Tenshou, but it is rather visible, and hiding you behind the Getsuga seems like a powerful strategy. Zangetsu merely nodded. Ichigo, Cazador de la Luna is growing stronger and faster with every hollow he consumes. For you to win your next battle, you too must grow stronger. Ichigo nodded, but sat down next to a nearby flagpole. We can spar in a few minutes then, partner. In the meantime, tell me a bit more about yourself. I'm curious. Zangetsu gave a rare smile and leapt onto the flagpole, both Ichigo and he staring up in the sky, looking at the blood-red moon. As much as I enjoy being your Zanpakuto, I miss forests, seeing the simple beauty of nature. I don't get to see too much of that back home, Ichigo commented. Comes with living in a suburb, I suppose. I'm not sure I see the appeal. It is difficult to describe, Zangetsu conceded. Perhaps the best way is to simply experience it. Ichigo glanced around, seeing nothing but sideways skyscrapers under the crimson-hued moon. How would I go about adding to the variety here? Maybe put a park or two, or something. Your inner world evolves as you do, Zangetsu said simply, as if that explained it all. And in a way, it did. Ichigo's brows furrowed as he thought heavily. So, because I haven't seen very much of nature, and don't understand the appeal, there are no forests, or lakes, or anything else. But if I began to spend time there, and have it begin to affect my personality, then part of my inner world would change. Correct. Remember, Ichigo, that no one stays the same forever. Change is a very large part of life. Ichigo merely nodded. This was a lesson that he knew well. Change cannot be avoided forever, he added. It is the ability to adapt to change that marks the most successful in any aspect of life. Indeed. They spent several minutes in comfortable silence. Do you enjoy stargazing? Ichigo suddenly asked. Very much. Especially where there are no artificial lights to hide the light of the stars, Zangetsu replied. The view was quite exquisite. Really? I didn't know that. Maybe I'll have try it sometime. I stargaze from the roof of my house, but there are lots of lights, so maybe I'll see if there is a good forest I can stargaze from. A hollow roar disrupted their relaxation, and Ichigo jumped to his feet. Well, looks like Cazador certainly isn't slacking off. He readied his weapon. Guess I better give it my all too. Cazador grinned as he faced off against another Ijukas. He'd taken several minutes to relax after feeling his latest evolution to Ijukas. Funnily enough, simply eating an Ijukas was enough to transform, instead of eating dozens of Jillian. Cazador liked it. More efficient. Maybe I will get to Vasto Lord in this single session of control. Becoming an Ijukas had created quite a significant increase to his power, and that was a feeling the Arrancar liked very much. Only one part of Cazador had changed in his pre-resurrection state, and that was his mask. Before, a red-on-white patterned mask had covered only the top left part of Cazador's face, the part between his hairline and his eyebrow. Now, the mask had changed, and covered his entire forehead, with what looked like two jagged crimson hooks facing each other on a white background. I wonder what my resurrection mask looks like. Hell, I wonder how my resurrection has changed. Just a minute ago, Cazador had jumped down and taken a bite out of an Ijukas before slaying it with Zangetsu. He was a bit disappointed. He'd expected the Ijukas to at least put up a decent fight. Oh well, at least this other guy's looks like he's ready to go. Who the hell are you? The Ijukas, this one looking remarkably like an enormous 16-legged spider, demanded. You're obviously an Arrancar, so why aren't you up in Las Noches with Aizen-sama? The name's Cazador, he grinned. And your name is food. Show me what you've got. Chapter 11. Perspective. Inoue Orihime groggily woke up in an uncomfortable position. She blinked, seeing the earth practically flying before her eyes. The memories came back to her then. Oh, right, going to go save Chad's grandfather. Ah, you're awake, Yoruichi greeted from behind Inoue, who suddenly realized that she was being carried over the woman's shoulder. They came to a stop so Yoruichi could set the busty human down. Where are we? Inoue asked after being set down. Right now, we should be in District 62, though we're close to we're asleep for quite some time, Yoruichi responded. At dawn, I changed from my cat form into my human form and began to carry you here. Remember, our target is District 80. Inoue nodded her understanding. Shall I start to fly us again? Hell no, Yoruichi said sharply. You're still recovering from Reiatsu depletion, and we need to pick up some food for us. Inoue looked down. Right, she whispered. The cat turned human immediately realized she had sounded a bit harsh. Listen, Orihime, you've done nothing wrong. We needed to see how far you could go using your shield for flying, and we found out. But it's never a good idea to use a large amount of Reiatsu immediately afterwards, and we do need to eat to regain our strength, she explained. Inoue nodded. Right, she said again, this time a bit more cheerfully. All right then, let's go to the nearest village. It should be in this direction, Yoruichi mused, shifting into her cat form and leading the way. Cazador frowned as he sat down, leaning against a nearby quartz tree within Maino's forest. These Ijukas are weak, he muttered. I haven't needed to even use Sonido, and my Sero is like a one-hit kill. He glanced down at himself. None of them can even cut me when I let them. Is this how Kenpachi feels all the time? Surrounded by weaklings who cannot even focus their intent enough to cut through my Hiero. He sighed. If this keeps up, I might as well let Ichigo take over again. At least in our inner world, I can fight Ichigo, and he always puts up a great fight. He shook his head. The last few times Cazador had attempted to garner the location of a Vasto Lord to fight, his opponents had known nothing, or at the very least not divulged any information. Wait a minute, Cazador jumped to his feet. That Ishido guy said the Vasto Lord and stronger Ijukas were above Maino's forest, living on the surface. He looked up. Only question is, how do I get up there? Maybe if I use a Getsuga Tenshou and try to slice my way to the surface. I wouldn't recommend trying that, Ichigo warned. We have no idea how thick the barrier is. We know it's not particularly thin, as hollows come in all sizes, and we haven't seen or felt a single tremor come through. Who knows? It could be miles thick. Cazador frowned again. You've got a point. Perhaps Ishido knows. Good idea, but how are you going to find him, Baka? Maino's forest is huge, and we already saw that he's incredibly skilled at Shunpo. He could be anywhere, even places we've already looked. He's gotta have a place to stay to rest, Cazador reasoned. He is a Shinigami, and unlike hollows, Shinigami need to rest and eat to regain their strength. Point, Ichigo conceded, unless he has more than one of them, which would make sense if the hollows have figured that out. Do you have a better idea? The hollow challenged. Number. With a smug smirk, Cazador used Sonido to disappear in a random direction, reaching out with his spiritual sense to find another Ijukas to interrogate. Aizen peered over his interlocked fingers at his Quinta and Sexta Espada. So, Kurosaki Ichigo has become a hollow. A powerful, fully transformed Arankar no less. Yes, Aizen-sama, Neutra replied. Unless he has a twin or something. But he has no memories of his former life. None that we could tell, Aizen-sama, Grimjow answered. He didn't remember me at all. And the mask fragment was definitely from the one when Kurosaki fought me, so I'm positive that it's him. This could be the break I have been waiting for, Aizen mused. That's one less Taicho-class Shinigami blocking the way to Karakura town, he smiled. No, not yet. Aizen-sama, I don't believe he has lost all of his memories for good, the master manipulator began. Or perhaps Urahara Kazuki is trying to plant a spy in our midst. I believe a test is in order. Grimjow, Neutra, you are dismissed. Ulquiorra. Grimjow and Neutra both bowed lightly to Aizen before slowly leaving, wanting to listen. The Quarta Espada walked in expressionlessly, not the least bit perturbed at having been caught listening by his master. Yes, Aizen-sama. I have a new assignment for you. Kidnap at least one of Kurosaki Ichigo's friends, and bring him or her here to Las Noches. Aizen's smile grew slightly. Perhaps the woman, or the weakling from your memories, the one with the strange arm. I leave the method to you. I hear and obey, Aizen-sama. Ulquiorra bowed and walked from the room. Che, Grimjow scoffed under his breath as Ulquiorra passed him. Apathetic bastard. Perhaps, Ulquiorra agreed at a normal volume in his emotionless tone. But you will never surpass my power, no matter how hard you strive. Grimjow growled, but knew better than to try to fight Ulquiorra this close to Aizen. One day I will prove you wrong. And that day is coming, I swear it. Ishida Ryu pushed his glasses up his nose as he set his books inside his backpack. There was no more pain when he moved, and if his intuition was correct, then he was fully healed. Getting up from the hospital bed experimentally, Ryu nodded to himself. He began to unwrap the bandages from his arms and hands. While the skin felt a little tender, there was hardly a scar on his body from where he'd been wounded. Even his fingers looked as though he hadn't abused them in that fight 2 days ago. Excellent, the Quincy murmured, continuing to unwrap the bandages around his legs, to find much the same condition as on his arms, tender to touch, but healed enough for the moment. He pulled on his school pants and looked at himself in a nearby mirror by a sink. After a few moments' consideration, he left the bandages around his abdomen and pulled on his shirt. Time to train. Ryu confidently made his way to the training room where he and his father had their fight. He was proud that he had at least managed to wound his father, but Ryu refused to let his growth end there. Letting his Quincy cross fall from his hand so it hung from his wrist, Ryu summoned his Quincy bow in his right hand. Keeping his dominant left hand at his side, he aimed the bow in a random direction and focused his mental energies, gathering more Reiatsu. It was easy enough to form an arrow, but keeping it aloft against the bowstring was difficult without using his left hand to hold it there. A bead of sweat trickled down Ryu's forehead as his focus was split, trying to maintain the bow, the arrow, keeping the arrow aloft, and pulling it back against the bowstring. The arrow inched back slowly. It took a few strain-filled minutes, but the arrow was finally in position. With a thought, Ryu released the arrow. The arrow flew true, but it was not as strong, nor as fast as arrows he could fire when using both hands. Ryu frowned. My father must have truly impressive mental discipline to fire so many powerful arrows at one time with only one hand. As much as he hated to, Ryu was growing to respect the man's power, even if he didn't respect his father as a person. Ryu, in his concentrated focus on his task, had no idea that Ishida Ryukin was watching from behind a corner, observing Ryu's progress. Ryukin shook his head, smothering the smile that threatened to form on his face. Impressive, Ryu. It took me years of training under your grandfather to progress to the point where I could fire arrows one-handed. Yet after only one training session, you've already grasped the concepts. Perhaps you do deserve that title of genius. Once more, Ryu raised his bow and summoned an arrow. This is similar to the Sanrei glove training, he murmured to himself. The Sanrei glove trained my focus and power to be able to absorb and shape Reiatsu despite the glove producing an artificial repellent to Reiatsu. This one-handed firing will train my focus further. Perhaps when I have mastered it, I will be able to use one hand to fire arrows, and one to use the Quincy silver tubes in tandem. Ryu narrowed his eyes in concentration as he slowly managed to pull back the arrow using only his power. I refuse to be left behind. Not by Kurosaki, not by Tu-san, not by anyone. He released another arrow and immediately began again. Flashes of memories ran through Ryu's head. Kurosaki defeating that Manos Grande shortly after gaining his powers, Kurosaki's Bankai, his hollow mask granting that insane level of power, Kurosaki fighting head-to-head with that incredibly fast Espada, the bitter acknowledgement that Kurosaki was stronger than he was. More flashes, from much longer ago. Those disappointed, stern looks from his father, his grandfather dying before his very eyes. I will prove my worth, Ryu whispered to himself as he struggled to pull back the arrow. That I promise, on my Quincy pride. He's awake. There was a veritable stampede as everyone in the farmhouse rushed to see the newly awakened Oscar Joaquin de la Rosa. They looked at the recovering man, smiling to see him alert. Welcome back, old man. My children, Oscar murmured with a smile. I am glad to have returned, but I know not how it happened. Please, someone, tell me what has happened since I was taken. Those bastards were going to execute you right in front of us, in this building we have worked so hard together in, Lonus told him, his voice as tight as his fists. But a man named Sato Yasutora heard of this and came to warn and help us. He claims to be your grandson. Oscar's eyes widened visibly. Yasutora, my boy, is that you? The crowd of men and children parted, allowing Chad to pass. He'd been in the back, nervous with anticipation. Abuelo. Oscar smiled. Yasutora, it is you. I am glad to see you again. Come give me a hug. A lone tear of happiness trailed its way down Chad's face from his right eye as he kneeled by the bed and hugged his abuelo. I have missed you, abuelo. I have missed you too, my boy. You've certainly grown into a veritable giant. Oscar replied as he got a good look at him. How did you find me? Did you die? No, abuelo, I still live, Chad answered. So much has happened since you left the living world, it is a long story. I eagerly await your telling, the old, now armless man said with a smile. I see we've grown in number during my time away. I'm proud of you all, thank you for continuing my dream. One day, we'll make this district the most peaceful in all of Seoul society. The men all cheered. We're going to go tend the fields now, Oscar. We'll be back soon, one of the men told him informatively before they filed out. Chad remained behind. They remained quiet for several moments. How are you doing, abuelo? Chad asked, looking guiltily at where his grandfather's arms should have been. Oscar caught where his grandson was gazing. I won't deny, losing my arms is a blow to my pride, he said softly, and I fear becoming a burden to the people I have tried so hard to protect. Chad smiled. A friend of mine is coming to restore your arms. You'll have them back soon. Oscar looked shocked. It sounds like you truly do have much to tell. Chad nodded. The story begins shortly after your death in the living world. I moved back to Japan. Some time later, Chad finished telling the tale of how he'd become friends with Ichigo, how he had awakened the latent powers in his right arm, and their rescue of Kuchiki Rukia. He described the tight-knit group that had formed around Ichigo, Ishida, Inoue and himself, and the revelation of finding his powers were similar to a hollow's. Chad related his insecurities of suddenly being unable to uphold the vow he and Ichigo had made to each other, to fight for each other, to watch each other's backs. He explained how Urahara had pointed out that it was likely that Oscar was in Seoul society somewhere, and Chad finished with his search for his abuelo. After some time searching with Yoruichi-sensei, we found clues pointing towards the North 80th District, and we came straight away, keeping our ears to the ground for more information. After arriving, I found out from one of the local gangs that you were being held hostage, and I rushed to save you, only to find that you had already been removed from the prison to be executed, Chad revealed. A boy held in prison there told me where to find this place, so I rescued him from there and came straight here, with time to spare. He fell silent. There is more, Oscar said after a moment, observing Chad's posture. Something painful. There is. Chad swallowed. When they came to execute you, and I saw that you had been tortured, that your arms had been taken from you, I snapped. I showed you my right arm, el brazo derecho del gigante. My left arm also transformed. He closed his eyes and activated his left arm. El brazo izquierda, del diablo. Oscar leaned back against the bedframe in surprise. Of the devil, he queried. Why that name? While my right arm draws power from my will to defend, my left comes from my will to attack. Chad's eyes shut tightly beneath his long shaggy hair, fearing his abuelo's response to what he was about to say, but unable to keep from saying it. In my rage, I transformed my arm for the first time. And I killed everyone but 3 Shinigami, in wrathful vengeance of the injustice they had inflicted upon you. And then I told them to run, to fear always that I would come for them, to live their lives in terror that I would come to exact my revenge. I broke my vow of never raising my fists for anything but defense of others. Chad looked up, hot tears of shame trailing down his cheeks as he deactivated his arm. Yasutora, I gained the power I was looking for, but at the cost of what? My humanity, my conscience. I have betrayed you, abuelo. You spent so long teaching me to use these strong arms of mine to protect others, as you protected me from the beating I so rightly deserved all those years ago. But here, I have become a killer. Chad released a choked sob. I wanted to kill them, I felt satisfaction when I did. What does that make me? It makes you human. What? Chad gasped. To his surprise, Oscar was looking at him with kind eyes. It is human to feel strongly for those you care for, Yasutora. You saw them and saw people who had inflicted a great deal of suffering purposely and willfully on others. More than that, you saw someone who you respected and loved brought to the verge of death. It is natural to desire revenge, and to take it when your emotions were at their darkest. But look at how you are now, feeling sorrow for taking lives. You are no monster, no devil. You are my boy, Sato Yasutora. Seeing his grandson's self-doubt still lingering, Oscar decided to try a different tact. This Kurosaki Ichigo, if his family had been taken by Aizen's forces, and tortured to demoralize him, how would he react? Knowing that his abuelo was trying to teach him once more, Chad thought hard about the scenario. I think he would snap, he finally said. Ichigo would unleash his full power and kill them all in a dark rage, or die trying. Oscar nodded. And knowing that your best friend, your comrade in arms, your nakama would have done the same thing you did, can you honestly say that such actions are inhuman? Chad shook his head negatively. I thought not. I too have killed someone, the old man admitted quietly. What? I was young, Oscar recalled. Cocky, foolish. But strong, very strong. Much like you were once, my boy. I was part of a gang, and we took pride in our petty thefts, our muggings, but then something happened, and everything spiraled out of control. His eyes glazed over, reliving the event. We'd just managed to rob a small-time store when suddenly my mask was ripped off from behind me and I was punched from behind. The owner of the store had anticipated the robbery and had been lying in wait. My parents didn't know anything of my activities, and I was suddenly afraid of what would happen if the owner revealed my identity to the police. He closed his eyes. I am not proud of what happened next. As if thinking along the same lines, two other gang members pounced him and held him against a wall. Our leader handed me a gun, and I killed that innocent man, fear overwhelming me. What happened next? Chad asked quietly. I had nightmares for weeks. On some days I thought of turning myself into the police. Others I tried to rationalize killing him, tried to ease my guilt, with failure. We never told a soul, but I quit the gang not long later. I was always seeing the man's face everywhere I looked, my hands never felt clean, I couldn't take any more. A couple of months later, I saved a young child from being run over by a car, and I felt a little better. I realized then the true purpose of strength is not to establish one's dominance, but to protect. Oscar shook his head to clear it of old memories. I am very proud of how you have grown, Yasutora. Oscar smiled. You have become a man strong not only in body, but in character. Your left arm, el brazo izquierdo del diablo, you said it was made from your will to attack. Something you must understand, Yasutora, is that protection is not made up solely of defense. No matter how strong the shield is, without eliminating the threat the shield will crumble. Chad recognized the argument from when Inoue had had her own troubles accepting the will to hurt others, and scolded himself for not remembering it. He hugged his grandfather again. Thank you, abuelo. Both men could tell that Chad was thanking Oscar for many things in that simple sentence, but neither said anything more. A knock on the door interrupted the two of them. Chad opened it, to find Inoue and Yoruichi. You arrived quickly, he said in surprise. Abuelo, this is Inoue Orihime, she's here to heal your arms. It's a pleasure to meet a beauty such as this, Oscar said with a grandfatherly smile. Please, call me Oscar. Inoue smiled back. You ready? At the nod, she brought her hands to her hairpins. Soden Kishun. Mere minutes later, Oscar stared in wonder as he stretched his arms. They felt as strong or stronger than when he'd lost them. That is truly an amazing power, he murmured in awe. Never stop reaching for the sky, young lady, you have the potential to do much. Inoue blushed prettily. Thank you, Oscar. No, thank you, Inoue, Chad said earnestly, going so far as to bow lightly in her direction. Chad, there's no need to bow to me. Inoue protested, flustered. Chad rose and smiled at her. Chad, it is time, you must return to the living world, Yoruichi suddenly said. I got a status update while I was there. Ichigo's gone missing and Ryu's training with his father. You have gained the power you sought for, it is time to protect your town with it. The Onimitsukido are coming to fetch you. Go, my boy, your friends need you, Oscar ordered gently. I'll be here next time you come around. Chad smiled. I will see you soon, I hope. I'm sure you will. With that, Chad, Inoue and Yoruichi headed out. Chad, we must make haste back to Karakura, Yoruichi emphasized. Aizen could attack at any time, now that Ryu and Ichigo are not available for combat. I will carry Orihime-chan. Follow me as fast as you can. Before Orihime could voice a complaint, Yoruichi had suddenly picked her up and dashed off with godlike speed, proving once again that she deserved her title as the goddess of Flash. Chad frowned, transforming both of his arms and began using Paso del Viento. To his satisfaction, he was much faster than when he'd only used El Brazo Direct del Gigante. He was not as fast as Yoruichi, but the Shunpo master slowed her pace enough for Chad to keep up. We'll arrive at the Seraiti in a couple of hours at this rate, Yoruichi called out as they passed a district. Think you can keep up the pace? It shouldn't be a problem, Chad replied honestly. With this second arm, I feel like my power has grown enormously. Good. I feel you'll need that power soon. Cazador was unsurprised when he saw Ishido suddenly appear in front of him in an impressive display of Shunpo. What is it you want? Ishido asked tonelessly. I want out of Maino's forest. Show me how to reach the surface, Cazador requested. Very well. Ishido Shunpo-ed away, and Cazador followed using Sonido. Eventually they came to a stop near a tall cliff. Ishido pointed at a small, difficult-to-see tunnel high up the cliff and to the left. The way to the surface is there. You may find your way blocked by Ijukas, however. Ask him if he wants to come with us, Ichigo suggested. It's always useful to have an ally. Cazador thought about it for a few seconds. Then he gave a mental shrug. Oi, Ishido, care to join me? You might grow even stronger up there. No, I will remain down here. I seek to reduce the number of hollows that travel to the living world, and the most common of them are simple hollows and Jillians, Ishido explained shortly. Cazador shrugged. All right, if that's your thing. Thanks for showing me the way out. He Sonido-ed up and into the tunnel before anyone had a chance to stop him. Time to chow down on the more powerful Ijukas, and maybe a Vasto Lord. Be careful, Cazador. Vasto Lord are supposed to be even stronger than Taicho-class Shinigami, Ichigo cautioned. Right. The Arrancar found himself at the end of the tunnel quickly enough, and looked around. Endless sands, as far as the eye could see, except in one direction. In that direction was a palace-like structure. I take it that's Las Noches. Cazador murmured. It looks pretty far away, must be enormous. It is. Cazador blinked, before instinctually blocking a strike from his side with Zangetsu. His opponent appeared to be quite similar to a bear, except the claws were much sharper, and the fur looked like it was made of needles. Despite having been caught unawares, Cazador grinned. You're stronger than those idiots in Maino's forest. Of course I am. The bear roared, firing a patch of needles from his chest at Cazador's face, forcing the Arrancar to dodge. Sat my hunger, you wannabe. I think not, Cazador said with a smirk, using Sonido to appear behind the Ijukas and slicing into and through the bear's left shoulder, cutting off the arm. Snatching it up, he took a bite from a non-needle-coated part and then killed the bear-like hollow before it could attack. He paused, passing judgment on the hollow's strength. Better, Cazador finally determined. But not strong enough, and still ruled by hunger. Must not have been an Ijukas long. Indeed, Ichigo agreed, having dispatched the Ijukas within their inner world easily with a well-placed Getsuga Tenshou. That one was all strength and no speed. So, Cazador, pick a direction. Cazador frowned. Well, we know what's in the direction of Las Noches. Aizen's Arrancar, made up of Ijukas, perhaps a Vasto Lord or two. Some of Aizen's servants, I imagine. Yeah, Ichigo agreed. We could go that way and start taking some of those servants out, but that would draw Aizen's attention back to us. Question is the benefit of killing and eating those servants worth the risk? Maybe. Hold on. Cazador blinked. Not too far off, to his right, he could see what appeared to be a child being chased by 3 hollows. What the hell? He used Sonido to dash over and check it out. Quickly noticing a hollow mask remnant on the child, he realized. A child Arrancar, he asked incredulously. Who are you? The thin, purple hollow with white body armor, gloves, and insect-like head, complete with mandibles, demanded. Cazador de la Luna, Cazador greeted. I don't suppose you guys are with Aizen. His words visibly brought all four hollows in front of him into a state of terror. Nel Sama, be ready to run, don't you know, the large one with black polka dots and an enormous tiki mask whispered to the young Arrancar. We'll distract him and meet up with you later. Yeah, the first one agreed. We'll handle this Espada. Cazador laughed aloud. I'm no Espada, he corrected with a manic grin. Just an Arrancar that doesn't like Aizen. See, I'm not even wearing that damned white outfit. Tell me, who are you? All four hollows, including the childlike Arrancar, sighed in relief. I'm Pesci, the purple one introduced. The polka-dotted one is Dondochaka, and our master here is Nel Sama. The big guy here is Bawabawa. The enormous blind-looking sandworm seemed to smile and nod at its name, making incoherent noises that seemed to indicate a, nice to meet you. Cazador nodded. How did Nel here get chibi-sized? He asked curiously. I thought all Arrancar had adult bodies. Yeah, how did Nel get like this? The green-haired Arrancar asked in a childish voice. Nel was quite small, with jaw-length hair and a crimson line that stretched from one side of her face to the other under her eyes. Nell's hollow mask remnant was the front part of a skull, but it was on the top of her head, worn akin to a hat. There was also a long scar between her eyes and reaching up to where the hollow mask remnant was cracked. The crack was quite long, and it appeared as though some of the mask's teeth had been forcibly broken. Cazador found himself curious about it. What happens to an Arrancar if his mask remnant is further damaged? Maybe that's the reason Nel turned into a child. Ichigo theorized. We know that removing some of the mask allows hollows to acquire Shinigami powers by becoming Arrancar, and the Arrancar's hollow powers are stored in a Zanpakuto. Perhaps taking too much of the mask off results in losing too much hollow power to sustain one's previous form. Well, it's safe to assume that Nel was transformed through the Haugyuku, Cazador pointed out, watching in mild amusement as Dondochaka and Pesci tried to placate a stubborn Nel without giving away her history. Perhaps the mask was damaged after, and Aizen put a Kido on her to keep her this way as an experiment. To see if the Arrancar could acquire more Shinigami power if the mask was taken off further. Feasible, Ichigo allowed. So, I see you don't want her to know about who or what she was before she was transformed, Cazador finally observed. Why is that? Maybe Nel will stop bugging you if you tell her why. Pesci bowed his head, reluctantly answering. Nel Sama, before you became the child you are now, you were a soul who desired for peace and goodwill, but were forced to fight, bringing you sorrow. We tried to keep your past from you so your memories would not return, so you would not be forced to fight again, don't you know, Dondochaka explained. Nel was an Espada once, wasn't Nel? The Arrancar asked quietly, her lisp making itself known. They spent several moments in silence. Yes, Pesci finally confirmed. You were betrayed and backstabbed by two Arrancar, one of them an Espada of lower rank. They broke your mask further, and you transformed into the Nel you are today. Then Aizen and all of the Espada left you for dead. Please, don't ask any more, Dondochaka pleaded. We kept your past from you to protect you, don't you know? But how's Nel supposed to protect her F-Wens? Nel insisted. Nel wants to keep her F-Wens safe too. Ichigo felt for her. They seemed to have the same wish to grow stronger, not for themselves, but for their precious friends. Cazador didn't quite understand. He sought power for himself, to become the strongest. However, he had come to respect Ichigo, who had grown as strong as he had so far in his motivation to protect. I dunno about you, but I think it's rather stupid to keep her weak like this. Cazador looked up as he stated his opinion. The Espada are growing stronger and Aizen won't be happy till he has everything. He'll kill or subjugate you if you're not strong enough, and then look how happy you'll all be. Nel shouldn't have to fight. Pesci insisted, the yellow eyes behind the mask narrowing angrily at the newcomer. Maybe, but isn't that her choice to make? Cazador pointed out easily, not worried about the Reiatsu Pesci was leaking. He's not strong enough to give me too much trouble. Just because you have power doesn't mean you have to fight, but it certainly makes it easier to survive if someone brings the fight to you. And it sounds like if you tried, she'd recall her power quickly enough. Aren't you happy this way, though? Pesci asked Nell desperately. The former Espada smiled at her friend. Nell's viewy happy with her F-Wens. But if Nell was an F-Pada, then Nell must have enemies. She looked down and used her toe to draw circles in the sand of Hueco Mundo. Nell has to grow up sometime. Both Dondochaka and Pesci looked down at this. All right, Nell-sama, we will help you remember who you once were, Dondochaka relented. Your full name is Neliel2 Oderschwenk, former Espada Trace, Pesci revealed. Cazador and Ichigo had the same bug-eyed expression upon hearing that. Former Espada Trace, Ichigo exclaimed, sputtering. Sweet Kami above. No kidding, Ichigo's hollow agreed dumbly. This brat used to be stronger than me. But her Reiatsu level is so low. So much lost power, for a mere crack in the mask. Note to self. Never, ever let my mask be damaged. Nell's reaction was a bit louder. Thought. I should have stayed in Soul Society and done the damn paperwork. Histugaya Tushiro sighed. Suddenly, the interdimensional communication device they'd built rang. Tushiro quickly answered, looking at the large two-way viewing monitor. Yamamoto Saotaicho. Hitsugaya Taicho, the wizened commander greeted formally. I have some news that I felt you may be interested in. Yes, Saotaicho. I recognize that it is difficult to be away from Soul Society at this time, and even more so as I have denied your request for reinforcements to compensate for the disappearance of substitute Shinigami Kurosaki Ichigo and the Quincy, Ishida Ryu, Yamamoto began. However, this may lighten your spirits somewhat. Hinamori Momo Fukutecho has awoken, and would like to speak to you. He stepped away from the monitor and allowed the image of a slightly ill-looking girl to step forward. The girl was about 5 feet 3 inches tall, with her black hair pulled into a small bun, although she let some hair frame her face on either side. Her eyes were kind and soft, looking as though she deserved to be a healer instead of a fighter. Momo, Tushiro thought in surprise, shouldn't you be in bed? You don't look like you've fully recovered yet. Momo smiled weakly. Hitsugaya Taicho, I'm almost completely better. I've been asleep for a while. That you have, Tushiro conceded, his memory flashing to checking up on his childhood friend as she lay in a coma from Aizen's sudden betrayal. He felt another flash of anger at the traitor before brutally quashing the emotion. I wanted to apologize, Momo said quietly. I shouldn't have attacked you that night, and I should have listened to you. You were right, and I wasn't thinking clearly. Tushiro looked slightly away to his left, trying not to show his embarrassment. Don't worry about it, it doesn't bother me. It was a trying time for all of us. The girl smiled, this time a bit more genuinely. Thank you for accepting my apology, Hitsugaya Taicho. While Tushiro tried his best to look cold and aloof, his eyes still betrayed a hint of concern to his longtime friend. You should get back to bed now, if that's all you needed to say, Hinamori Fukutecho. The way you look now makes you look like a little kid. You need to get more rest if you want to grow older. Momo snorted. You shouldn't be talking, Hitsugaya-kun. It's Hitsugaya Taicho, Tushiro reminded her softly, trying to gently remind her that the Saotaicho was still in the vicinity, and it was best to keep to formalities for the moment. That seemed to remind her of something else, however. Hitsugaya Taicho, are you going to fight Aizen Taicho? Momo asked quietly. If it comes to that, yes, Tushiro answered honestly. Hinamori Fukutecho, Aizen betrayed us. Everything we have seems to indicate that he was the leader of the rebellion, and I doubt he's going to stay in Hueco Mundo. That can't be, Momo exclaimed, her eyes watering as she shook her head in rejection of the idea. Not Aizen Taicho. Tushiro's eyes softened a little. I need to get through to her. The Aizen we knew as dead, or never existed to start. Hinamori, I've gotten more information since I arrived here in the living world. I've heard some things about what he did over 100 years ago, long before Ichimaru-jin or Tusen Kanami became Taicho. I don't think either of us ever knew the real Aizen, he finished quietly. What did he do? Momo asked, fearing the answer. He experimented in giving several Shinigami forbidden hollow powers, and then framed another Shinigami. Due to Aizen's actions, they were all to be executed, but they managed to escape. Aizen was never suspected. Momo's eyes hardened. Who told you such dreadful lies? They are not lies, the hard voice of Yamamoto interrupted as he reappeared behind Momo. It is a point of shame that we were fooled by Aizen's deception, and we attempted to execute Urahara Kazuki, Taicho of the 12th Division and founder of the Technology Bureau. Urahara managed to escape to the living world with the aid of Shihoin Yoruichi, and made himself untraceable using a modification of a recently invented Gigai. The Shinigami who acquired the Forbidden Hollow powers also escaped. Yamamoto's head bowed slightly, the closest he would come to expressing sorrow. We lost many strong Shinigami that day, and Urahara has rejected my invitation to rejoin our ranks. Momo's eyes were wide. But, why? Maybe Aizen had a good reason. If so, he should have come to me, Yamamoto said firmly. He did not, and therefore should have been executed 100 years ago. Hinamori Fukutecho, return to your quarters and rest. That is an order. Momo's posture slumped in defeat. Yes, Saotaicho. She left quickly. Yamamoto Saotaicho, you're in communication with Urahara-san. Tushiro asked, slightly surprised by the development. He'd always seen Yamamoto as a die-hard traditionalist, and not sending a squad to acquire and imprison Urahara was rather unusual. All rogue Shinigami were captured by the 2nd Division, and Tushiro knew that Soifun held no love for the ex-Taicho, though he was unclear on the details. Indeed, the reason I have not sent you any more forces, Hitsugaya Taicho, is to lure Aizen to the living world. Urahara-san is now collaborating with us for a special project I commissioned, that will allow all of the Taicho and Fukutecho to fight at their full power in the living world without interfering with the humans there, Yamamoto revealed. We shall face Aizen's forces in the final battle there. What about the Seraiti then? Tushiro inquired with a frown. If all of us are going to be in the living world, what would keep them from infiltrating Seraiti? If they are after the king's key like we suspect, then it would not be prudent to leave the original unguarded. Of course, the question of who will stay and who will fight in Karakura is one that is still being debated, but Aizen will die in this battle, even if I have to unleash my Bankai to do it, Yamamoto uttered darkly, opening his eyes beyond the slits he normally kept them at. Tushiro couldn't repress a shiver of unbridled fear. He'd seen Yamamoto's Shikai a couple of times over the years, and that was scary enough. As an ice-type Zanpakuto wielder, the phrase, reduce all creation to ash, Ryujin Jaka, had given him nightmares the night he'd seen it. That much fire and raw heat could remove almost all moisture from the air very quickly, rendering Tushiro's own Bankai almost completely helpless. Yamamoto's Bankai must be downright terrifying. Yamamoto's eyes narrowed again to their usual slits and he continued normally. Soifun Taicho has met with Shihoin Yoruichi and 2 of the Ryoka. Curiously, Kurosaki Ichigo was not among them. Do you have an explanation for this, Hitsugaya Taicho? Tushiro looked directly into Yamamoto's face through the viewing screen. I cannot know for sure, he lied coolly without hesitation, but is it not possible that Yoruichi-sama set Kurosaki a task to complete and was training the other 2 Ryoka in the meantime? Nevertheless, I will consult with Urahara-san and see if he is hiding the truth. Yamamoto nodded. Good. The Ryoka will be arriving in the living world shortly. Do you have anything else to report? Hitsugaya nodded. Now that Kurosaki is gone, fewer and fewer hollows appear by the day. I suspect that Kurosaki's lack of proper control over his Reiatsu is to blame, and propose that he receive additional training to rectify that weakness when prudent. Denied, Yamamoto immediately responded. Kurosaki is strong enough to defeat mid-level Taicho as it is, and has no real tie to Soul Society. We have already made ourselves potential enemies by attempting to execute Kuchiki Rukia. While Aizen's voice acted for the Central 46 in that instance, giving Shinigami powers to a human is still against our laws. Kurosaki refused to abide by those laws, and inspired many of my own forces to rebel. Though it was a good thing that he did in this instance, if Kurosaki grows too strong, he could become a threat as large if not larger than Aizen. I suspect that several of my own Shinigami would defect and join him in that event, which would cause a civil war far more disastrous than our current war. You're not wrong, Tushiro thought to himself. I believe I understand, Saotaicho, but why have you not taken action against Yoruichi-sama if that is the case? She is believed to be training Kurosaki, after all. Shihoin Yoruichi does have positive ties to Soul Society, and maintains friendly camaraderie with Soifun Taicho. It is my intent that Yoruichi instill respect and trust for Soul Society into Kurosaki, so that he may one day join us as a member of the Gote 13, Yamamoto explained. Chushiro nodded. I understand, Sao Taicho. He would become a powerful asset to the Gote 13. Have you more to report? No, Sao Taicho. Dismissed. All right, go. Yoruichi ordered Chad and Inoue as they approached the Senkaimon, the gate back to the living world. I'm going to stay here in Soul Society. Urahara has me supposedly training Ichigo, and I'm going to do some digging around. I'll return to the living world as soon as I can. Understood, Chad acknowledged. Inoue, let's go. Right. The pair began running into the Senkaimon, and entered the Dongai, a small dimension between the living world and Soul Society. It was a creepy dimension, consisting of only a single path, while the walls on either side pulsed and moved, as though they were inside a living creature. It was far too dangerous to touch the walls. They had a current of spiritual energy that attempted to consume anything that touched them, as Ishida and Ichigo had experienced firsthand during their first time in the Dongai. However, it served as a highly effective barrier to hollows, who were often far too large, which made the Dongai an efficient way to traverse between the living and spirit worlds. Inoue, what happened to Ichigo? Chad rumbled after a minute of running. He turned into a hollow, Inoue told him, her voice cracking. What? Chad exclaimed. It's only temporary, according to Urahara, Inoue quickly clarified. Everyone's confident that Ichigo will be back soon. I see. Interesting. Chad and Inoue froze, recognizing the voice. A few meters in front of him, a garganta opened, and Ulquiorra stepped though, his usual uncaring expression still on his face. Kurosaki Ichigo has become a hollow. I had my doubts when Aizen-sama told me, thank you for your information. Ulquiorra-san, what do you want? Inoue asked, a little afraid. I have been ordered by Aizen-sama to take at least one of you hostage, to test if the hollow form of Kurosaki Ichigo truly has lost its memories of Kurosaki Ichigo's life, Ulquiorra explained matter-of-factly. As I am still curious if your group can successfully defeat Yami's Resurrection form, I will grant you two a choice. Who shall I take? He looked piercingly at the pair of humans with spiritual powers. I will take at least one of you. The two of you combined could not hope to defeat me at your current level. Chad and Inoue looked at each other. I should go, Chad told her quietly. My powers are like a hollow's anyway. I'll likely be stronger in Hueco Mundo, and this could prove useful if Ichigo retakes control and attempts to free me. Inoue shook her head. No, Ulquiorra should take me. You're needed in Karakura to protect everyone. You're a lot faster and better at fighting than I am, especially as you got your new left arm. Besides, if Kurosaki-kun does try to save me, he's going to get hurt, and might need my healing. There are other healers on our side in Karakura, but none in Hueco Mundo. Chad frowned, understanding her point but not wanting to admit it. Would your hostage be expected to fight? He asked Ulquiorra directly. No, if I understand Aizen-sama correctly, the hostage will be kept imprisoned within Las Noches. It would be counterproductive to put the hostage's life in imminent danger if we need the hostage to lure Kurosaki Ichigo's hollow, Ulquiorra replied coolly. Further, if we were going to kill you, Aizen-sama would have asked me to simply kill you here. Inoue nodded and stepped forward. I'll be your hostage. Let Chad continue to the living world. Very well. Enter the Garganta. It will take you directly to your holding cell in Las Noches. Inoue approached Ulquiorra and the Garganta, before looking over her shoulder. See you later, Chad. Don't die before I get back. Chad nodded. See you later, Inoue. Don't you die either. Inoue's eyes glinted with understanding before she took a deep breath and entered the Garganta. With a small gesture from the errand car, the Garganta closed behind her. Ulquiorra paused before creating another Garganta. How interesting. I had expected her to show more fear, he murmured. Inoue's come a long way, Chad agreed. I think she was afraid, but she was committed to this since you said only one of us could go on. We have faith that Ichigo will rescue her. If there had been no hope, then we would have fought you to the end. Ulquiorra cocked his head to the side. What is this faith you speak of? Chad paused to consider the question. It's a feeling based on trust. When I say that I have faith in Ichigo, it means that I trust him to do everything within his power to accomplish something. In this case, to rescue Inoue. The unfeeling Arrancar's eyes narrowed pensively. How do you know he has sufficient power? Chad shrugged. I can't know for sure. This idea of faith seems foolish, Ulquiorra finally said. It is based on the fragile bond of trust and understanding of another's personality. You do not have the power to accomplish your own goals, so you wish someone else to accomplish them for you. How is Kurosaki Ichigo even to know of the girl's capture? Perhaps it is foolish, Chad conceded. But perhaps not. He activated his right arm. This arm's power is based on my faith in my abuelo's teachings, that strength's purpose is to protect. The stronger my faith and will, the stronger this arm's power is. Now Ulquiorra's face changed very subtly. His eyes glittered with interest as he stepped towards Chad. How curious. A feeling given physical manifestation through Reiatsu manipulation. He stopped in his tracks, his facial expression changing slightly once more, this one more of a grimace than anything else Chad had seen him express. How unfortunate. Aizen-sama is waiting for me to report after having captured the girl. Tell me, boy, what is your name? Sato Yasutora. I will remember you, Sato Yasutora. I feel I have learned something more about humans and emotions. Don't die before we have a chance to discuss more, Ulquiorra ordered flatly before opening the Garganta and entering it, the Garganta closing behind him. Chad shook his head. I wonder, is it a good thing or not that Ulquiorra is interested in me? He began running again through the Dongai, rushing to return to the living world. Urahara must be alerted. Perhaps he can contact Ichigo. You were certainly quick, Ulquiorra, Aizen complimented mere minutes later, taking in the sight of the powerful Arrancar kneeling a few meters away. The Shinigami were foolish enough to let both Sato Yasutora and the girl into the Dongai without any reinforcements, Ulquiorra informed his master. I see. Out of curiosity, why did you not take them both? Aizen inquired from his throne where he sat languidly. Alone, despair will overwhelm the female and keep her from fighting against her fate. Together, they may have encouraged each other and attempted to escape, Ulquiorra responded smoothly. Also, news of her capture will demoralize their fighters, knowing that two of their fighters were completely helpless against one of yours. Well thought out as always, Ulquiorra, Aizen replied with a smile. You are dismissed. Aizen-sama. Ulquiorra stood and withdrew from the room. Konami, what is your opinion on this matter? Chusen stepped to the side into view from behind Aizen's throne. I dislike taking hostages on principle, he said simply. However, I can see how it follows the path of least bloodshed, by determining now if Kurosaki Ichigo's hollow is a threat. Thank you for your understanding, Aizen said softly. Now, to complete the test, this Cazador de la Luna must be notified of the girl's capture. He smirked knowingly, and with a snap of his fingers, an Arrancar appeared. Ah, Rudobin. Aizen-sama. Rudobin fell to one knee, silently swearing his fealty once again. Unlike all the other Arrancar, Rudobin's mask was still fully formed on his head, despite his otherwise completely human-shaped body. The mask itself was lean, with thin, wide slits of eyes, and long, slightly curved horns, but aside from that it looked fairly unremarkable. Please fetch Zamari Luru, I have a task for him. Chapter 12. Control, Urahara-san, Chad exclaimed, emerging from the Senkaimon within Urahara's basement. Naturally, the shopkeeper was waiting for him. Sato-kun. Urahara sounded genuinely confused. Where is Inoue-chan? I thought she was with you. She was, but the Dongai was invaded by an Espada, Chad quickly explained. Ulquiorra took her as bait for Ichigo's hollow. Urahara's eyes widened. That's bad. That's very, very bad. Especially with her powers of reality rejection. Did Ulquiorra hint that they knew about her powers? Chad shook his head no. Do you have any way to contact Ichigo? The large young man queried. No, Urahara responded distractedly, obviously thinking of what to do. No matter how I look at it, we have to send in a rescue party. Ichigo is strong, but I don't think he's strong enough yet to just take Inoue-chan from Aizen's grasp, not if Aizen is expecting him. I'm going, Chad half stated, half demanded. Of course. Ishida-kun will probably join you if we can contact him, Urahara mused. Chad blinked. Ishida-kun has been training with his father. who cut him off from all external contact, Urahara quickly explained. Ishida Ryukin is probably at the hospital at this time if you wish to talk to him. I will contact Hitsugaya Taicho and Soul Society and see if they will offer reinforcements. His face set to a determined mask, Chad nodded. I'll be back. With a thought, he activated both arms and vanished with a Paso del Viento. Urahara blinked, then smiled. That's new. It looks like he's gotten much stronger. Then he too disappeared, flickering into a shunpo. Chad dashed to the hospital and to the nearby park before he felt another presence behind him. And who are you, with that strange hollow like Reiatsu? A cold voice asked. I highly advise against attacking my hospital. Chad turned around to see a man who looked like an older version of Ishida Ryu, with a slightly more rounded face. Are you Ishida Ryukin? Chad rumbled. I am. Thank Kami. I need to see Ishida Ryu. Something grave has happened, something he must know. As I told those two Shinigami, Ryu will come back when he is ready, and not before, Ryukin stated with a glare. Would you please grant me an audience with him? Chad pleaded. I'm not here to force him to come back, but to inform him of the fate of one of our friends. Ryukin narrowed his eyes at Chad, pushing his glasses up his nose. Finally, he nodded. Stay right here. I will be back momentarily. Ryukin disappeared with a flash of Herenkyaku. A few minutes later, Ryukin reappeared. Ryu will be along shortly. Indeed, a scant minute later, the younger Quincy arrived. Chad, Ryu asked in surprise. When did you get back? Just now, but there's no time. Chad fervently answered. Inoue's been captured. What? Ryu gasped. Details. Now, Inoue and I were in the Dongai, returning from Soul Society. Ulquiorra appeared, and said he was on orders from Aizen to kidnap at least one of us as bait for Ichigo. We argued briefly, but Inoue was the one taken, Chad summarized. Ryu nodded. Right. Where is Kurosaki? Already in Hueco Mundo. I'll give you details along the way, Chad told him. Urahara is currently trying to get reinforcements from the Shinigami. Don't count on any help from them, Ryu told him bitterly. Don't forget that Rukia and Renji are Ichigo's friends too, Chad countered. Ryu's eyes widened at the rebuttal, but then nodded. He turned to his father. Thank you for the training, Chu-san, but I must go. What is so special about this girl, this Inoue? Ryukin questioned coldly. She has the power to reject reality within a limited area of effect, Ryu answered reluctantly. If Aizen gets that power. Ryukin's eyes widened, then narrowed. I see. Go, then, Ryu. Use my training well. Thank you, Chu-san. Let's go, Chad. Remembering that Chad didn't have a high-speed technique, he began running normally through the streets. You're slow. Ryu was surprised to see Chad dash past him in a speed comparable to his own Herenkyaku, though it was still slower. Ryu rapidly caught up, however. Looks like you've gotten a lot faster. He eyed Chad's new arms. And stronger. Chad grunted an affirmative. Yoruichi-sensei is a sadistic trainer. Insecurity crept slowly into Ryu's thoughts. Could Chad have surpassed me as well? Ryu shook his head, focusing on the present. Orihime comes first. Several minutes later, they arrived back at Urahara's shop, where most of the Shinigami had gathered. Ah, Sato-kun, Ishida-kun, the shopkeeper greeted. I was just explaining the situation. And, Ryu looked at the short, white-haired Taicho. Will you help? Hitsugaya sighed. Ishida-san, I owe Inoue-san my life. Unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that I, and the rest of the Shinigami stationed here, need to stay here to help protect the living world from Aizen. Hitsugaya Taicho. Rukia stepped forward. I am going with them. What? Kuchiki-san, did you not hear what I just said? Hitsugaya asked, his voice low and his eyes narrow. I did, but even with me gone, you still have 5 perfectly capable Shinigami, 2 of whom can use Bankai, Rukia pointed out. I only have Shikai, and my ice powers are not as developed as yours. I am not really needed here, and Orihime is my friend. She shook her head. I cannot just leave her there. Suddenly, a cell phone rang. Everyone blinked as Matsumoto Rangaku answered her Soul Society-issued cell phone. Matsumoto here. Yes, yes. But sir, understood. I will pass along the information. What was that about? Akaku asked bluntly. Matsumoto did not look happy. We have new orders. We are to return to Soul Society. To ensure we comply and return to Soul Society safely, they are sending Kuchiki Taicho and Zaraki Taicho to escort us all. Rukia and Renji looked positively mutinous. Glancing at them, Hitsugaya was reminded of Yamamoto's words in their previous conversation. Kurosaki Ichigo, how is it you gain our loyalty so easily, so effortlessly? Kuchiki-san, Abarai Fukutecho, I don't like it either, but the alternative is making Soul Society our enemies while we chase after your friend who may or may not be rescued by Kurosaki, Ishida-san and Sato-san. Renji clenched his fists in helpless anger. Don't wait for us, he bit out bitterly to Ryu and Chad. We'll catch up if we can. When we can, Rukia corrected, meeting her childhood friend's eyes fiercely. Renji nodded at her in acknowledgement. We will catch up, he assured his friends. One way, or another. Ryu's hardened eyes flashed. Very well, Urahara, please open the way to Haweko Mundo. If we cannot count on the Shinigami, there is no point in waiting. I should have known better than to count on Shinigami to aid a Quincy and a spiritually gifted human. He was gratified to see all the Shinigami save Rukia and Renji flinch. That's not fair, Ishida-san, Yumashika responded, running a hand through his hair. You're judging us all on the orders of our boss. For all you know, he's organizing a powerful force to invade Haweko Mundo as we speak. That's not fair, Yumashika-san, you mocked. Your people judged all the Quincy because our leaders were ignorant and refused to negotiate with you Shinigami. For all you knew, they could have been devising a way to modifying our Quincy arrows to not completely obliterate a soul from existence. If you can paint an entire race with a single brush, why can't I? And don't even give me that shit about, that was then, we've changed since then. You're being led by the same people, governed by the same laws. Change doesn't happen until you want it to happen, and so far I've not seen a single Shinigami save Kurosaki Ichigo and Kuchiki Rukia who showed a shred of compassion of the plight of my people. There was silence for several moments as the Shinigami, even Hitsugaya, tried to formulate an argument. Finally, Hitsugaya looked Ryu straight in the eye. I cannot refute your argument, but allow me to reveal part of our Saotaicho's plan as he revealed it to me. I'm listening. Yamamoto Saotaicho plans to lure Aizen and his forces here to the living world, where special provisions will be made to ensure the population's safety, while allowing our strongest forces to launch a full-scale assault sans limiter, Hitsugaya related. If I am right, then this is the reason for our being recalled now, to leave virtually no protection in the living world. You could use this as a powerful distraction to infiltrate the enemy's base of operations and rescue Inoue-san. Ryu's mind whirled. That is quite an opportunity. Indeed, Chad murmured aloud, his own not insignificant intelligence easily appreciating the chance being given to them. Hitsugaya Taicho is correct, Urahara stated solemnly, pushing back his hat so his face could be seen clearly. I completed the preparations to protect the living world just earlier today, prior to Chad Kun's return. If you'll follow me, I'll open the way to Haweko Mundo. I highly suggest you find Ichigo before infiltrating Aizen's base of operations. He walked back into his shop, and the only two non-Shinigami in the group followed. Cazador was feeling uneasy. He had been for the last few hours that he had traveled with Nell in her former fashion, and that troubled him. Something has changed, he murmured. Cazador, you say something. Pesci asked. Perhaps these guys know something I don't. Something feels different, Cazador admitted. I'm not sure what, but I'm positive that something bad has happened. Something bad, Dondochaka repeated. Like what? Cazador had not been in control of Ichigo's body long, and didn't really have the experience required to draw the more common analogies. However, he decided to try anyway. It's like suddenly having this feeling like your enemy has some ace up his sleeve, or like you're just about to step into his trap, but you just don't know it yet. He knew those feelings from personal experience. Ichigo really is a tricky, stubborn bastard when he wants to be. Pesci looked up, one bony hand on his chin. That's rather specific. I suppose it comes down to, whoever your enemy is, what could possibly change to give him an advantage? Cazador fell silent. That was actually a damn good question. A more powerful Arrancar. Maybe Aizen invaded Karakura already and we weren't there to help fight back. Ichigo suggested darkly. Cazador shivered. That's a chilling thought. What's wrong? You're not normally this morbid. You're not the only one getting this bad feeling about things, Ichigo informed him with a strained voice. At times I get the crazy feeling of familiarity, as though there's the barest of sense of something I should recognize. It's like I should know what it is, but the answer keeps eluding me. It's taking every shred of patience I have not to try to take back my body right now and check on my friends. Cazador blinked. He suddenly had a suspicion, a horrible suspicion of the truth. Does that feeling get stronger when I do this? He purposely reached out with his spiritual sense, feeling out the Reiatsu in the air. Cazador could swear he could feel his mental partner perk up. Yes, it's much stronger this time. Ichigo paused. Wait, if the feeling is stronger when you're sensing Reiatsu, then you're probably detecting traces of one or more of your friends, Cazador finished grimly. Which explains my bad feelings as well. They're going to use my friends to lure us in, Ichigo agreed tightly. Cazador, you're leaking more Reiatsu than usual, don't you know? Dondochaka pointed out nervously. Cazador's eyes narrowed, making Dondochaka jump back in fear. We're not alone, the orange-haired Arankar muttered. Show yourself. A new Arankar Sonido ed several meters front of Cazador. Impressive that you could detect me, the newcomer complimented, his voice a low baritone. The Arankar was tall, muscular, bald and extremely dark-skinned, and his mask fragment seemed divided into two parts. Atop his head lay a single line of small spikes along the crest, and he also wore a thick bony necklace. He wore Aizen's uniform with obvious pride. My name is Zamari Luru, Septima Espada. I come bearing a message from Aizen-sama. What is the message? Cazador inquired with a scowl, mirroring Ichigo's own. Aizen-sama wishes to invite you to join our cause, and to inform you that a human girl, Inoue or Hime, will die if you do not appear before him within the next 12 hours, Zamari relayed. Inoue. Ichigo's voice was full of worry. Cazador frowned. He knew without asking that Ichigo would break their deal in a heartbeat if it meant saving his friend, and he actually liked the current arrangement. Well, looks like I have no choice. He let loose a wild grin. Best kill this one now then. Alright, I'll go see Aizen, after I kill you. Cazador shouted, dashing at Zamari with Sonido. Zamari merely shook his head, and let himself be stabbed. Cazador blinked. That was too easy. Indeed it was. Cazador spun, seeing another Zamari standing a few feet away, completely unharmed. He chanced a glance at the one he'd stabbed, only to find that it was gone. What under the heavens? How did you do that? He demanded. Out of all the Espada, my Sonido is the fastest, the dark-skinned Arankar answered with only the barest of hints of smugness in his voice. What you just saw was my Gemello's Sonido. When I move at my maximum speed, I can create up to 5 after images of myself. That's impressive, but I'm still going to kill you, Cazador complimented with a grin. And that's something we'll have to try. Speed is our specialty, Ichigo. Damn right, I fail to see the point of this fight, Zamari stated, looking his opponent dead in the eye. I have performed my duty as Aizen-sama's faithful servant and informed you of the girl's capture, and you are not fast enough to keep me from leaving. There is nothing keeping me here. In the time it took Cazador to blink, Zamari was gone. Damn it, Cazador cursed, stabbing Zangetsu into the sands of Hueco Mundo angrily. I'm not gonna get a better shot than that to kill him. We can worry about that later, Cazador. We have to go save Inoue. Ichigo insisted. What about your other friends? I'm sure they're already on their way. We can wait for them. Have you forgotten what Zamari said already? Aizen's gonna kill her in 12 hours if we don't show up. Who knows where the hell my other friends will end up in Hueco Mundo? Cazador frowned. I can't believe I'm the one telling you this, but it's not exactly a good idea charging in alone, when we don't know the full capabilities of everyone there. I enjoy a good fight, but going alone is suicide. He has a point, Ichigo, Zangetsu murmured quietly. Ichigo seethed with frustration, not wanting to acknowledge the point but knowing what they said was the truth. What about with Nell then? He questioned. If we can get her to recover her powers, then we'd have a former third Espada on our side. If that ain't sufficient backup for a quick in-and-out mission, I don't know what is. Cazador thought about that possibility for several seconds as he turned to view the Arrancar he was currently traveling with, who were currently hiding behind a large sand dune. He sighed, then shook his head slowly, negatively. From the looks of it, Nell's gonna need a damn powerful trigger to regain her old form in that short of a time. So, no. We don't have any way of knowing when or where our backup will appear in Hueco Mundo. Ichigo pointed out, for all we know, they will be too late. And I'm telling you, I am not going to try to assault Aizen's fortress without backup. You heard Urahara, we are the last resort against Aizen. It's foolish to risk us for a single woman. Listen to you, Ichigo spat, you are not my hollow, you are a coward hiding in a hollow's skin. Cazador bristled at the insult. I am no coward, I merely have no interest in your friends, I only want to grow stronger. Why should I risk my skin for your friends? You lost to me in our last fight, horse. Suddenly, Cazador realized that perhaps he had gone a bit too far when he felt Ichigo's Reiatsu levels rise dangerously. The next thing he knew, the Arrancar felt himself dragged into their inner world. The first thing he saw when he arrived was Ichigo's back. The Shinigami had drawn his Zanpakuto and was looking up at the crimson moon that hung in the sky. Cazador de la Luna, Ichigo turned to view his hollow counterpart, his eyes determined. How do you feel about another deal? What? It's obvious we won't agree about this situation. You earned control of my body, and you still have over a week left before our next scheduled fight, Ichigo admitted. His brown eyes hardened. But I can't let Inoue get killed. So, I have a deal to propose. Cazador's eyes glittered in interest. The last deal we made turned out really well for both of us. I'm listening. We fight, once more for control. If I win, I get control of my body and we return to our bi-monthly fights. Nothing changes. And if I win, Cazador leered, you keep my body for as long as you want it, Ichigo told him, and I won't argue with your decisions any longer. Truly a tempting offer, Ichigo's hollow side contemplated. There's no real risk to me in this deal. Either I win and I gain eternal dominance, or I lose and get the chance for dominance later. He grinned insanely. Let's do it. To Cazador's mild surprise, Ichigo grinned tightly, holding his Zanpakuto in front of him, in an all too familiar position. I'd hoped you would agree. Bankai. Bankai so soon, Ichigo. Cazador taunted, drawing his own Zangetsu. A sign of weaken. Cazador found himself cut off as he instinctually brought his cleaver in front of him horizontally, just in the nick of time to block Ichigo, who had suddenly appeared right in front of him to deliver a brutally vicious downward slash. Getsuga Tenshou. Ichigo's hollow side let loose a sharp cry of pain as the Getsuga raged against his Zanpakuto, pushing him into and through two of the sideways skyscrapers that made up Ichigo's mind before landing in a crater on a third. Cazador got to his feet, bruised and bleeding slightly in several places. Not bad, he admitted. But, without warning, Ichigo materialized in front of him in another impressive display of his mastery of Shunpo plus Bankai speed enhancement, already swinging his Tensa Zangetsu, a silent Getsuga already charged and ready. You talk too much. Cazador blocked, now wielding two Zanpakuto that were crossed together in an X. He'd barely managed to manifest his alter ego's Shikai Zangetsu into existence so he could block. The two Zangetsu were successfully holding off Ichigo's Bankai, though he was buckling as Ichigo focused more power into the move. With a burst of Sonido, Cazador disappeared, leaving Ichigo's Getsuga to collide harmlessly into another skyscraper. I don't stand a chance like this, I have to use Resurrection. He used Sonido several times, trying to gain enough distance to buy himself enough time. Tear the sky as. I don't think so, Ichigo said coolly, shunpoing so he was right behind Cazador's left shoulder, Tensa Zangetsu already in motion. Cazador was forced to abandon his Resurrection attempt in favor of getting the hell out the way with Sonido. He wants to keep me from using Resurrection, giving himself the necessary advantage to win, he realized with a smile. A cunning, ruthless, practically heartless plan. Ichigo's definitely serious about this fight, with everything on the line like this. He frowned, though, as he once more crossed blades with Ichigo before disappearing with Sonido. Problem is, I can't find a flaw. Ichigo in his Bankai is far too fast to escape, too strong to beat down with brute force. My only hope is a distraction. Cazador locked blades with his opponent once more, only to find the wind knocked out of him as Ichigo took advantage of Cazador's occupied arms and kicked him in the stomach as hard as he could. Cazador was sent flying into another crater. Ow! Cazador grunted. I just need 2 seconds. Getsuga Tenshou, he cried, swinging his Zanpakuto together instinctually as Ichigo dashed at him. Ichigo suddenly found that his speed was a detriment as he was suddenly too close to dodge the twin Getsuga. He was forced to block. It only took him a second to deflect the blast upwards, but the Shinigami had the sinking feeling he was too late. He was. Tear the sky asunder, Zangetsu. Cazador screamed gleefully with a maniacal grin, holding both Zangetsu in front of him. Fuck, Ichigo cursed, materializing his second Tensa Zangetsu, knowing he'd need it in just a moment. As the smoke cleared, it occurred to him that this was the first time Ichigo had gotten a chance to see Cazador's Ijuka's Resurrection form, so he studied it closely. Cazador's hollow mask had expanded, wrapping entirely around his head and forming a curved horn on either side. As before, the mask stopped at the upper jaw, allowing only Cazador's lower jaw to be seen. The mask had crimson marking forming a pattern around the Cazador's head, but another marking trailed down from each eye hole, down to where the mask ended. Slightly surprisingly, the markings continued past the mask down to his neck. A long mane of orange hair flowed down from the back of the mask, all the way down to mid-back. 2 long, curved horns aiming forward had appeared as well, giving Cazador a fearsome look. The scale-like red-on-white armor that Cazador had sported as a Jillian had changed as well. Instead of covering the entire torso, it only covered his rib cage up to his shoulders. His hollow hole was in the middle of that armor, with red markings extending outwards from that hole, presumably to the back, with a couple of the lines reaching up to meet the markings on the neck. The lizard-style frills no longer grew around his neck. Instead, the frills had been changed into what looked like red fur surrounding all but the very front of his neck, though the fur still angled upwards much like the frills did. There was more of the same fur surrounding his ankles and wrists. Cazador's crimson leggings still bore white wavy lines as they had in his Jillian Resurrection, and similar blood-red lines wound down his arms from where the markings on his armor met his shoulders. The lizard tail that he'd sported as a Jillian was completely gone, and Cazador's feet still resembled a human's, except the toenails had extended and curved to resemble claws. That's better, the Arrancar said, casually shrugging his shoulders to make them pop. It was a good strategy, Ichigo, trying to keep me from unleashing my Resurrection, but you were doomed to fail. Ichigo grit his teeth, angry at his failure, but still determined to win. I may have failed to keep you in your previous form, but I refuse to lose here. You think you can last long? Cazador taunted. We are using both of our Tensa Zangetsu, your body can't hope to last long in the speeds we'll be fighting at. But unlike you, I have high-speed regeneration. I can keep this up forever. Ichigo shunpoed behind Cazador, swinging with his left Tensa Zangetsu, only to be summarily blocked as his hollow self held his sword over his shoulder. You may have the regeneration, you soul-leeching bastard, Ichigo growled out, before disappearing again. He began to circle around Cazador, using several successive shunpo that made him seem to flicker in and out of existence, at times leaving 3 or 4 afterimages at a time. But I will not lose. Cazador stood still, keeping both his Zanpakuto at the ready, waiting. There, he barely blocked a strike from Ichigo, only to realize that he'd only blocked one of Ichigo's swords when he felt his right leg get cut off by the second one. Ichigo attempted to press his advantage, striking repeatedly, but Cazador managed to block every strike and then Sonito out of the way on his remaining leg. In the time it took Ichigo to catch up using shunpo, Cazador's leg had already half regrown. I need to use more power. Apparently, Cazador had the same thought, as they slammed all 4 of their blades together, all of them smothered in a violent reiatsu. Getsuga Tenshou. Several minutes before, what do you think Cazador's doing? Pesci whispered to his comrades as he watched Cazador stare into space, making subtle movements as though having an internal dialogue. I don't know, don't you know, Dondochaka responded, confused. Maybe he's talking to himself. Nell suggested. Ah, Maybe he's trying to figure out what to do next. Pesci postulated excitedly. Could be, Dondochaka acceded. He repressed a shiver at seeing a wide, malicious smirk form on Cazador's face. But I don't think we're gonna like what he's thinking, don't you know? Suddenly Cazador froze. Then a pulse of Reiatsu erupted from him, and all three observers got a very strong feeling that they should get the hell out of there and watch from a much, much longer distance. Run away, Pesci cried, and the three of them scrambled for cover several more sand dunes back, out of sight. They were just in time. Cazador's body was beginning to look around, searching for a target. Seeing none, and sand in every other direction, the berserker began walking towards the palace in the distance, Las Noches. Seconds later, the berserker clutched his head and let loose a hollow roar. He slashed out with his left hand, a black Tensa Zangetsu appearing mid-swing. A silent Getsuga was unleashed upon the sand dunes, sending sand flying everywhere. His right hand held the white Zangetsu, still in Shikai state. He began running towards Las Noches, slowly changing with every step he took to Cazador's Resurrección form. This is exceedingly odd, Pesci said quietly as they shadowed the body of their friend. Normally a Resurrección is instantaneous, but this one seems to take time. I don't think Cazador's in control of his body. What would make that happen? Nell queried. Maybe he hasn't eaten enough hollows recently, and now he's struggling to put down the hollows he has. Pesci answered somberly, although I've never heard of that happening to an Arrancar before. Another wave of Reiatsu emerged, coinciding with when Cazador completed his Resurrección. The white Zangetsu changed shape to Tensa Zangetsu, and the transformation sped up. It took mere seconds for the berserker to completely assume the form of Cazador's Resurrección. He seems to have a purpose, don't you know, Dondochaka observed. He hasn't done anything but head towards Las Noches. To be fair, it is the biggest structure around, Pesci justified. Maybe he's looking for someone strong to fight. Let's make sure we're not seen then, Nell whispered in fear. Both her companions nodded. Ichigo's inner world. Ichigo lost the War of Getsugas and found himself flying through a skyscraper himself, his hands and arms bleeding from parts of the Getsuga that had gotten him. Damn it, he swore, keeping his eyes on Cazador. There has to be a way to beat him. You're not doing too badly, Ichigo, Cazador admitted. I thought for sure my Resurrección form would annihilate you, but you've gotten stronger too. He grinned, a fearsome sight combined with his mask. But you're still no match for me. Not when your bones are already cracking from the strain of using both Tensa Zangetsu, and you don't have high-speed regeneration to repair it. Ichigo scowled, bitterly acknowledging the truth. Something Cazador said nagged at him, however. It had ever since Cazador had used his Resurrección. There was something about high-speed regeneration that just refused to leave Ichigo alone, and he was afraid it would start to affect his reaction speed if he didn't figure it out. High-speed regeneration, my mask, his eyes widened. Wait, I could use my mask in here, when I learned how to use the regeneration. Ichigo barely kept a smirk from forming as he thought furiously, using Shunpo to avoid a crippling slash from Cazador. He began spinning both Tensa Zangetsu by the ends of their chains, charging up a Getsuga. Come to think of it, Cazador could use my power initially. He was in Arrancar form, which is a mixture of Shinigami and Hollow. Why can't I do the same? Sero, Cazador screamed, a Sero having been forming in between his horns. Getsuga Tenshou, Ichigo roared, slashing both Tensa Zangetsu across his body. The black crescent attack Ichigo unleashed slammed into Cazador's crimson Sero, slicing into it and forcing the Sero to split into two separate ones, each of which missed Ichigo by a mile. Unfortunately, by the time the Getsuga had reached Cazador, it had run out of power and merely dissipated. Ichigo took advantage of Cazador being unable to see him through the Sero to Shunpo to a slightly safer location. Please let this work, Ichigo thought frantically, as he brought his left hand, the one holding the white Tensa Zangetsu, over his face. To his satisfaction, he could see his fingers starting to emit the sinister-feeling hollow Reiatsu. He could feel his mask there, just waiting to be called into existence. He allowed himself to smirk now. Hey, Cazador, he called calmly, Shunpo-ing several meters behind the hollow. Cazador turned around, and while Ichigo couldn't see Cazador's eyes clearly behind the mask, he was sure they had widened. As it was, the rest of his hollow self's body language expressed shock. "No," Cazador whispered. Ichigo's smirk widened. "Oh hell yes." He tore at the air in front of his face, ripping his mask into place. He wore the old mask, the white one with red tribal marks only the left side, though Ichigo could not see this. "Time to take your rightful place, Cazador." Cazador blinked, and then Ichigo was gone. He felt pain in his abdomen and looked down. A black Tensei was embedded within his stomach. Holding it was a masked Ichigo, who tore the blade up, all the way to his hollow hole before pulling it out. I've lost," Cazador realized as he felt his feet begin to disintegrate. "Damn it, I never expected an idiot like you to realize you could use my power here as well." Ichigo took off the mask and crushed it. "You only have yourself to blame," he revealed quietly. "What? It was you who reminded me. I am Vizard," Ichigo said heavily. "A mixture of Shinigami and Hollow. If you can use my Shinigami powers, I can use your Hollow ones." "Perhaps so, King," Cazador conceded, his torso starting to fade away. "And you have just earned my Ijuka's mask." "What do you mean?" Ichigo demanded. Cazador laughed, his neck already gone. "Figure it out on your own, King. My liege should be smart and strong enough to figure it out without my hand feeding him the answers." With that, he was gone. The Vizard narrowed his eyes. Fine. He turned on his heel, noting that the night sky was fading into the sunny sky Ichigo's inner world had originally. "Now to save Inoue. You with me, Zangetsu." The Zanpakuto spirit had been sitting on a nearby flagpole since Cazador had faded. He jumped down now and looked Ichigo in the eyes. "Always. I would recommend checking in with Urahara, however. Perhaps you can acquire allies as a Shinigami that you could not as a Hollow." "How would I? Never mind. Since I am back in control, I should be able to use Cazador's Garganta ability," Ichigo figured out. "Thanks for the advice, and for training with me." Zangetsu nodded. "You have grown strong, Ichigo. Now go and demonstrate your strength." Ichigo found himself back in Hueco Mundo, and felt a strange mask on his face. He removed it and looked at it. It was the same shape as the mask he was used to, but it had a stripe going up and down each eye, a stripe that stained the teeth of the mask and reached down to the bottom of the mask. It also felt heavier than the old one. Heavier, and stronger, Ichigo realized, shattering the mask in his fist. So this is what Cazador meant by his Ijuka's mask. That taken care of, he glanced at himself. He was back in his Shinigami outfit. "Good," he murmured. "Who are you?" Pesci demanded as he and his friends jumped out from behind the dune they had been hiding behind. "You're obviously not Cazador de la Luna, but you came out of his body, don't you know?" Dondochaka agreed. "Me?" Ichigo asked. "I'm Kurosaki Ichigo. Cazador is the Hollow that lives inside me. I gave him control for a while, but now I'm back in charge." "You look like a Shinigami," Dondochaka accused. "I am, sort of," Ichigo replied. "Aren't Shinigami evil?" Nell asked innocently. "They kill Hollows for no good reason." Ichigo thought about how to respond to that. "Well, Shinigami think Hollows are evil, as they eat humans to survive," he finally said. "And a lot of humans become Shinigami after they die if they're not eaten by Hollows. So Shinigami and Hollows fight each other, each side trying to get stronger." "Does that mean you're going to kill Nell?" Nell asked fearfully. Pesci and Dondochaka tensed, ready to intercept any strike Ichigo may attempt. Ichigo violently shook his head. No, I'm not. You may be a former Espada, and a Hollow, but I'm not going to kill you. You guys eat other Hollows to survive, right? As long as you don't go after humans, I won't go after you. Besides," he looked at Nell and smiled gently, patting her cracked mask very gently. "You look like a little girl to me. And little girls in my world need to be protected." Nell's eyes widened. "You're the nicest Shinigami Nell's ever met," she informed him, wonder in her voice. Ichigo chuckled lowly. "I'm probably the only Shinigami you've ever met, outside of Aizen and his gang. That reminds me, listen, I need to go back to the human world for a while. Try to stay out of trouble, okay? I'll be back really soon." Pesci quickly made an executive decision, grabbing Nell's hand. "Right, come, Nell-sama," Nell looked reluctant, but let herself be dragged back by Pesci and Dondochaka. Once they were out of earshot, Pesci began fervently whispering to her. It's best to just let him go. But why? He is a Shinigami, and who knows if he'll change his mind. Like he said, to Shinigami, hollows are evil, so he wouldn't think twice about going back on his word to kill us. Pesci tried to explain. Ichigo wouldn't do that, Nell argued, her lisp butchering her pronunciation of Ichigo. You can't know that, Pesci countered. You've known him for all of 3 minutes. He could be trying to fool you. Nell pouted, not wanting to concede the point. If Nell has too. In the meantime, Ichigo had summoned his mask and looked at it. It was the lighter Jillian mask. Okay, should work. He put it back on his face. Now, how do I create a Garganta? Well, Cazador just slashed in the air like this with his claws. Ichigo tensed his left hand into a claw shape, charged it with some hollow Reiatsu, and swiped with it into the air. He was rather surprised when he felt the hollow Reiatsu form a strange pattern in his fingertips and saw the Garganta form. That was surprisingly easy. When I thought that hollows learn things by instinct, I didn't realize it was that instinctual. He let the Garganta close and this time set his mind's eye on Urahara's secret underground training basement, thinking that perhaps it would take him directly there. This time, when he opened the Garganta, he stepped into it. All of a sudden, Ichigo felt himself falling. Reacting instinctively, he channeled Reiatsu to his feet and began to airwalk. So, this is the place between dimensions. It was rather turbulent. It took a strong will to maintain his airwalking technique by solidifying the spirit particles in this void. Ichigo looked around. Behind him was almost pitch black, but in front of him was lighter, a sort of grayish color. Ichigo headed towards the lightest part, hoping it would take him to his preferred destination. Not long later, maybe half an hour of running and maintaining the airwalk, Ichigo found himself at a barrier. Instinctively, he made the same clawing motion as before, and tore open the barrier between worlds. He emerged into Urahara's training basement, as he had wanted. Quickly removing his mask and crushing it, Ichigo let the Garganta close. Looks like I'm back. Time to check up with Urahara. And once I'm done here, I'll see if I can open a Garganta straight to Inoue. His hands tightened into fists. Inoue, I'm coming for you. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.